This is Ross Coulthard, and you are listening to That UFO Podcast.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. This is an end-of-year breakdown, and just before the door closes on 2024, our feet are firmly, or toes at least, are through the door into 2025. I've asked Dan to jump on and look back at the year that was 2024. So Dan, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, and happy new year to you and everyone. I finally have an excuse to use one of these things. Little fireworks in the background if you're not on audio.
Yeah, if you're one of the audio purists, you won't see the wonderful technology that is when Dan says Happy New Year, the fireworks go off in the background. Although mine's didn't, Dan. Is that supposed to happen?
I had to click a button.
Okay. See, the AI machines haven't quite taken over yet, as many folks are expecting them to. Perhaps in the year ahead, maybe not the worst thing. You know, Terminator 2 is starting to look like a good idea at this point, the way the world's going. But yeah, so Dan, here to talk through some of the key stories from the last year, our thoughts on 2024, the year that was, and then a whole load of listener points, questions, opinions, thoughts as well. But I thought we could start just by having a little chat on, firstly, just the year 2024 in my head, Dan. And I suppose I'm cheating a little bit because I've just done the highlight show. So in my head, I've got early part of the year, we had the congressional skiffs that happened with Burchett, Burleson, all those folks were all going in and out of skiffs. There was the rally in March for the Schumer Appreciation Society, is what I hope they call themselves, out in New York. We had I couldn't believe it was March, but that's when the LA hotel mummies presentation thing was. It seems like it was much later than that, but that was back in March, where they had the really bad presentation and the mummy's finger was hanging off and everything in the video. As I'm sure folks will remember, you loved seeing that, Dan.
Yeah.
Then I think it was a slightly quieter summer as things kind of was like, we're getting hearings soon. Those never quite happened. We then ended up with Louis Elizondo's book coming out. We had the hearings, we had James Fox's documentary, and then a whole load of drones. That for me has been the year. And it's quite funny that the second half of the year has ended up a whole lot, I suppose, busier or news heavy than the first half of the year was. What's the kind of 2024 timeline like in your head?
Everything gets blurry. I was literally on a show discussing the drones not too long ago, and I had to catch myself because I said the Chinese spy balloon thing happened early this year, and I was like, no, that was early last year. It all gets muddled.
I can totally appreciate that as well. That that was early February. Yes, 2023, and you're like, shit, fuck, that was the year before. Like, yeah, yeah. No, I know where you're coming from.
Flown by. Yeah, I guess for me, pretty much what you said. I would throw in, Lou's book coming out. That was a moment of anticipation for people. Obviously, the drones made a big flash. Immaculate Constellation as well. Those documents kind of stood out as for better or worse, kind of a moment this year. And there were a few other things as well. The war book came out, finally kind of finishing To the Stars. Peter Lavender and Tom DeLonge's series looking into the phenomena of God's man and war. So it was nice to get that rounded off, but we're still waiting for the fiction one. And also there was some Joe Rogan interviews throughout the year as well that kind of stood out to me. Flint Dibble, Graham Hancock kind of debating over, archaeology and hidden ancient civilizations and things like that. So yeah, I would largely agree, but I just kind of chuck those things in.
Do you have any personal highlights? I mean, I would think your Tom DeLonge t-shirt must be up there.
That was the year before. That just kept on winning as they went on tour. Yeah, it was.
No chance. Like, really?
It was, yeah.
God, this is ridiculous.
That was when I was touring the US in 2023. So yeah, Blink just went on tour, so it was just on show a lot. And yeah, that got out there. So yeah, I mean, that is a personal highlight. It was very cool to see Tom rocking my designs up on stage. As a big Blink-182 fan, teenage me was losing his mind. Other personal highlights, I guess, early this month, I had the pleasure of doing a roundtable with Vinny, Rob Sheridan, and Lou
You mean last month?
on
This is now
last month.
January.
Yeah, sorry, God. Yeah, it's
Timelines
January.
are ridiculous
We're
here,
all
aren't
over
they?
the place. What even is
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of had like a nice wide-ranging conversation about the phenomena that kind of went from, it addressed everything from the overclassification, encouraging conspiracies to kind of rear their heads and get spread around, as well as kind of cultural lenses on the phenomena. And I got to show off a cool old video that someone sent me, and I am notoriously picky with those. And it's the only one that kind of, if you imagine Metal Gear Solid, I don't know if you played it back in the day when the guards would
yeah.
kind of spot you, an exclamation mark would pop over their heads. It's the only one
Yeah.
I've ever seen that made me do that.
Did you share that video with me, or did someone else?
I remember showing you, I think before or after we recorded, and you did the exact same as everyone else I show it, where you're just watching it, it's a ball of light, and then at a certain point they shine a torch at it, and it goes from like, yeah, ball of light to, oh, and everyone makes that noise.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And I suppose we might come to talk at this at one point about evidence and whatnot, but we've got to the point really strangely that video and modern video is harder to take on as evidence of anything because of AI and CGI being so good.
Yeah.
And just your average Joe with a keyboard, I can't do it yet, but not that I want to learn it, but fudging videos like that, your average person can do that with relatively little skill compared to what it used to take,
Yeah.
years ago. So
Well, now it just takes, I think it's $400 a month to get access to OpenAI's video generation technology, where you
really,
could just make something like that, and
yeah,
they can go all the way up to 1080p videos, and they look pretty good. And we're used to seeing just clips of UFO videos, right? No one ever films them leaving and things like that. So
yeah.
they get spread around, and I saw one just today that was being spread around as if it was real, and it's just like, here we go, 2025, the age of AI video.
Yes, I think we are there, to be honest. But listen, 2024 then, Dan, some key highlights and talking points from us both then before we get to listener stuff. Do you want to kick us off with just pick one? Doesn't have to be in any particular order. Can be a highlight, can be a low light, whatever.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with probably the most recent in people's minds, the New Jersey drone debacle. It was one of those moments where, whether you believe something was happening or you'd seen one and you lived there or not, it really highlighted some kind of blind spots for people. And I choose to look at it positively, because more people are looking up and learning about the sky than in, since forever. It highlighted a disconnect, I think, between people on the ground and the authorities and what they were saying, and kind of emphasized that need for transparency and showing your working and things like that. But it also educated many people about how to deconflict sightings and things they see in the sky. So you see people putting up UFO videos and things like that, not just with, this is a light I saw in the sky, but more people than ever using flight trackers and star trackers to kind of discern. And I think it was the New Jersey governor filmed what turned out to be the Orion's belt. And even he had to learn, it was very public. So not choosing to kind of highlight it as a crazy thing that happened, but just one of those really good moments that I think was educational and instructive for everyone.
I think you're fair to say it's a crazy thing that happened. So I've got on my list of 4 things that is on there. I think it's very remiss to not have it because it's still ongoing, which is odd. And for me, it kind of started back in the general story was back in November when we got the reports over 4 RAF bases in the UK used by the United States. At least 2 of them allegedly have nuclear weapon or nuclear materials stored on those bases. And we had these reports of lights and orbs and drones over these bases. There were some videos, and a listener got in touch a couple of weeks ago to say there were still some reports, but not as many of objects over those bases as well, because people were out filming. It then seemed to move to the east coast of the US, where particularly over New Jersey, like you say, we've had a whole spate of these. Now, you're right, and I think a big takeaway for me and a positive has been how many folks are looking up at the sky. People walk about looking at their phones, so everyone's looking down, not straight ahead, because that would be weird to walk about with your phone in front of you.
We almost need like a a video feed on the back of our phones, right, to show us what's in
Yeah,
front of us.
it's coming, right? Yeah, it's coming. Double-sided phones, but people are looking down at their phones, so they're always missing what's in the night sky. And I've said to you before, Dan, and you like your beach walks and stuff. And if you're walking your dog here, or the dog over, you've got stateside. And if I'm walking my dog here, we're always tending to be looking up at the sky. So you're likely to see something more, or be more interested in seeing something than your average person on the street who has no interest in UFOs, who won't be looking up at the sky, who are always going to be on their phone. This has given folks a reason to point their phones at the sky. So that is a positive, but with that comes the, I suppose, negative. We are getting loads and loads and loads of videos of stars, people saying that orbs are stars when they are out of focus stars. My sister a few years ago, and I'm sure I shared this, Dan, she shared with me a video. She was like, I filmed this last night out my window. How weird is this? It wasn't there, and then it was. It was a star that appeared because the sun went down, and then it looks like it's spinning on the phone. It's just the way, when you zoom in like times 50 on a Samsung a few years ago, what the star kind of looked, it just looked really out of focus. That was all it was.
Yeah.
And she was like, it was there for hours, but moved really slowly across the sky. I'm like, yeah, that's
like Earth.
that's what stars do, because we are moving. It's actually us that are moving and everything. And I went, it does look really cool. I get that, and it's flashing loads of different colors. I'm no expert, but I'm guessing because of the camera and the phone and whatever's happening there.
Generally, atmospheric interference. You can look up at the night sky and you'll find a star that is flashing kind of close to the horizon, because that's just what happens.
Yeah, and she's filming through a window in a room, all that kind of stuff as well. So there we go, on a basic phone. So yeah, there's been loads of videos like that. However, there have been a handful of reasonably interesting ones. And this is, if you take away my pessimism from the whole thing, which I've been really honest, that I think 90% of the videos are people filming stars or planes. There are people filming legitimate drones within these. And the mystery is, why are the drones there? What are they for? What are they doing? That is really intriguing, and has been. It should be bigger international news than it is. I know it seemed to take over quite big in the US, but in the UK it was still barely touched upon. This is quite an odd thing to happen, and there's a conversation there. But I think I ended up just over Christmas spending a lot less time on socials and stuff, and trying to wind down a little bit with the family and everything. We had a bit of illness in the house, as we always do this time of year. And it just got really, just going through any feed, it was just video after video after video of people saying this light was in the sky and then shot off really quickly. Okay, the video shows a 7-second clip of a light in the sky. You don't see the shooting off really quickly. And it was loads of stuff like that. So it got a little bit frustrating. But the overall drone mystery, Dan, what's your take on it? I suppose good as place as any to start.
Yeah, I mean, we've been hearing for years now that there have been drone incursions into US bases all over the world. And I think there's a habit that this community has where it kind of conflates everything into one. So, like now, if a drone appears, in Japan, it's a New Jersey drone in Japan. And it's just like, well, it's the other side of the planet. It could just be someone else. It doesn't have to be the same thing. But there is, and I hate to use the phrase because, this is one of my, like, bad phrases like nothing burger and stuff, but there's a there. The US are mitigating against these threats. There have been people arrested for flying drones over. There was a Chinese national who was arrested just last month for doing that at a US airbase. And they could all just be small pockets of things like that. But this is an ongoing issue, and the US doesn't seem to be addressing it. They get these kind of counter drone measures out, and they say that they don't work. But the truth of those things is that the counter drone measures are fallible. You have these. You have like essentially what is an infrared kind of photography platform, so you don't need to worry about it being nighttime and stuff like that to try and get a picture of these things. But then you also have, you've probably seen them, these big guns. They look really sci-fi and they're very macho, but all they do is essentially, with your internet where you have like a 2.4 gigahertz or 5 gigahertz network, it'll just blanket one of those kind of bands with noise, so that if there is someone operating in the area, they can no longer reach their drone, and the drone should kind of return to home base in a panic, as they're set to do, or fall out of the sky. But that band is huge. And if these guns only are set to certain bands, then it's easy to kind of go around them, you know, especially if you're, you know, imagine if you're a billionaire and you kind of want to fly some drones and not get caught, you essentially can just message or, you know, have some contact with the manufacturer of those kind of guns, find out what frequencies they use and just don't use those frequencies. And then suddenly it's a mysterious object that isn't affected by counter drone measures. So there are very human, prosaic ways around the counter drone measures that are being deployed. So for me, it's been a big learn this year about this kind of stuff. But before this year, I think when I heard the phrase counter drone measures don't work, I would have thought, oh, that's mysterious. That's something, you know, maybe not of this earth, and that's why it doesn't work.
It's the
Truth
seventh
is,
observable.
yeah, it works on I don't know, like some different band.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that education is really valuable because now I don't jump to those conclusions. You know, there's more digging to do with all these things, but there is clearly a effort to put drones over sensitive US facilities in multiple parts of the world and cause a bit of a ruckus. What they're for, we don't know, but it could just be as simple as they want to see if the US can respond to these things, you know, testing defenses and things like that. And there are plenty of countries that will want to do that. So even though it might not be alien or NHI, it's still stupidly intriguing because it could impact, and I hope that word doesn't turn out to be a pun of any kind. It could impact us all in 2025 if these things become commonplace, as we're seeing in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
We'll come back to the drones because a few listeners have got questions and thoughts about those within there as well. So I'll kick in one of my talking points from the year. You may have it, Dan, you may not. I had drone sightings, obviously, as one of my four. So my second one would be lack of whistleblowers coming forward. As we left,
I do have this one.
do you? Right, okay. So we left 2023, and it seemed that in the year of David Grush that we were on the cusp, and we were promised, we were told there were this string of whistleblowers almost waiting in a green room somewhere, preparing themselves to come on. You know, they were in makeup chairs and everything. People were readying them for their 5 minutes. January turned into February, turned into April, turned into May, turned into June, and it never happened. The only, and forgive me if I'm forgetting anyone, but whistleblower that came forward would be Jason Sands.
Sirigam too.
I was about to say, would you count Sarah as a whistleblower?
Yeah, I think even more so after seeing that moment in the phenomena where you can kind of see it take a breath. And I've spoken to Sarah about that moment since then, and she said, you know, that they filmed that in like a while back, kind of almost. I think she said 2023. Don't quote me on that, but you know, it was really early on when James was making the movie, and so that was almost her first moment where she was saying something publicly. So I'd count her as a whistleblower. We also had oh damn, I forgot his name now. Logan, LeVar Logan,
Lenvar Logan, yeah,
Lenvar Logan. That's it. Who also worked with the UAP task force. I'd say those are the three whistleblowers that came forward, but none of them had this kind of damning evidence that we were told that
there was nothing on the level of a Grush, though, was there? Like that. This is, and I would still say in terms of the three, what Sands came out and said was the closest to Grush, but still nowhere near the level, which was frustrating. And we just never got that level of whistleblower coming forward. I mean, to be fair, we never really heard much from Grush in 2024 at all. So
no,
that for me was a bit of a frustration. Lack of whistleblowers coming forward. I'll ask, is that because of the job that was done on Grush to really make his life difficult, shall we say? That it's put other people off, or other reasons?
I mean, it's possible that they were put off and they wanted more robust protections before they came forward. But we've since heard from people like Corbell about these first-hand whistleblowers that he had lined up to testify at the congressional hearings who didn't appear for reasons that, you know, Corbell doesn't know. He just knows that they weren't asked to appear. We've also learned that it was Eric Davis, who gave intel to Grush that led to those 40 whistleblowers kind of, being found. Not that he gave names, he just kind of gave tips, and Grush eventually found them. But they were said to be whistleblowers with first-hand experience of the legacy program, whereas the whistleblowers we got were all first-hand witnesses of the UAPTF. Sands, as you say, is the closest in terms of those kind of things, because his encounter kind of goes way back. But then you have the issue where Sands came out in the past few weeks kind of talking about shooting aliens and non-human intelligence, which James responded on social media that completely devalued his testimony, which I thought was interesting, because I remember when we were talking about the phenomena, I was saying that Jason Sands' testimony is going to be the one that challenges people, because it's the one that's just so far out there. And we always talk about this, people's red lines and where they are. You can somehow accept an alien species coming from another star system to kind of interact with us, yet meeting one of those aliens on a road in the desert is too far. It's really funny how those two things don't go together.
Yeah. I was going to make a point there on something you said. I was kind of quite enjoying listening to you there. Sorry. So yeah, on the whistleblower stuff, do you feel it's a little bit like, or for me, this is how it feels, as if we've got the MCU and Marvel are making Iron Man and Thor, and we're building to an Avengers movie, but we're still not made the Avengers movie yet, and we just keep getting more movies of the individual
and the release
characters.
date just keeps getting pushed back as well.
It's
You're
like
gonna get Endgame this year.
we're still
Oh,
waiting
no,
on
it's
that
next year.
culmination,
It's
yeah,
next year.
and it's just not came. I don't think at all we'll get to the hearings and stuff. Obviously, like any of those hearings have been it, because it feels like a year where there was progress made. There were certainly steps forward. Maybe in some ways there were some sideways steps or steps back as well. But I think the conversation's so multifaceted that you can't just say, I mean, I suppose you could say overall was there progress or not, but there was a lot of areas progress was made. A lot of areas maybe it went back a little bit. Other areas stayed the same. But is that fair?
Yeah, I'd be really curious. I was thinking the other day, actually, I remember when Lou laid out him and Chris's kind of idea of 5 pillars, the public conversation, the Senate conversation, academia, and there were a few other places. But I'd love to hear his kind of end of year rating on either on how those progressed or diminished as the year kind of went on, and where they stand now. Because certainly the conversation's gone bigger, around Lou's book, seeing him go on the Daily Show, that reached a lot of new people. This drone thing has reached a lot of people who will inevitably talk about UFOs and aliens and stuff like that. So the conversation, I would say, is bigger than ever. But is it what's the quality? Is it quantity over quality that we're looking at?
Yeah. And again, you could say aspects of the conversation or people have gotten bigger, not necessarily always the conversation. There's any number of aspects of the UFO story that can be overshadowed by the people pushing it.
Sure.
Even like small aspects of it. Something recently, I won't name names or stuff, but it was frustrating that
Everyone's playing Guess Who at home now as you talk.
Yeah, they don't have to. I'm not degrading people, but there was a newspaper in the UK shared an exclusive or a picture of one of these alleged drones that really quickly multiple people who have an interest in the UFO topic, including aviation experts, messaged me to say that picture is almost definitely this aircraft with the exact name and number of the aircraft, and that it's nothing special or spectacular. It's just there's the aircraft. But this paper ran with it as it's one of these drones, and look how huge this triangular shaped object was. And I can't prove either way, but very, very, very likely to be it's just a picture of this aircraft's lights. They even line up exactly as you can see the aircraft in the daylight. You can be like, if I turned that picture black and put the lights against a silhouette, would it look like that? Yes, it would. Now, if you want to go down the whole UFO mimicry route and all that kind of stuff, or it just happened to line up, maybe there's UFO shaped like Batman balloons, all that kind of stuff. But that kind of stuff really frustrated things for me. And I said to you, Dan, and I can't remember if I said on the podcast, it would have been really easy for me to sit every night on YouTube talking about the drone stuff and sharing videos that I believed to be prosaic, but making out they're not, and making money off it and getting views and getting engagement and getting clicks. But I didn't, because I was like, I don't see anything spectacular or interesting here to warrant making any content on it to report to people. And if I've missed out on the most incredible UFO video of all time at some point, then fair enough. But I just didn't see it. And I know it's really mixed people's opinions online. Again, not to go back to the drone stuff, but that for me was a frustration, just the way people have gone on with some of that. And was it filling a void or was it picking up on a story? I don't know. I feel I took us off track there.
No, I totally see where you're coming from. We always address this, the kind of the subtleties. You've got the facts and then you've got the people that live in the gaps. And something like that, for clicks, better or worse, that newspaper put up that story with, I think I remember the headline being like spectacular drone photo. And it's so definitive that they're playing with that. And then people kind of appeal to that authority. They see it in a newspaper and they think that means that it must be real. It's said as if it's a fact. When someone comes along and can prove that it's actually X plane, they don't want to believe it. And so everyone's kind of choose your own adventure story cup is being filled in whichever way they kind of want it filled, instead of just letting the plate spin and letting it play out. And the mimicry thing frustrated me too, because I mean, you could take a picture of anything in the sky then and say it's a UFO. And it feels very 90s to me. Like, yes, I'm aware in history there have been reports of mimicry and stuff like that. But when you can see, a United Airlines logo on the side of it, and you can track the plane to the airport and see which passengers are on it and stuff like that, it's a stretch for me.
What do you make of the whole mimicry thing in general? So it's a larger conversation for another time, but just curiously, like you say, it does seem very 90s. The idea that UFOs can make themselves look like black unmarked helicopters or aircraft. And what do you think of that?
It's an interesting one, because they're always kind of, when you look at the reports of the mimicry, they're always close but wrong. So, the black helicopters won't have any markings. They'll be silent. There are differentiating points. And also a lot of the mimicry cases are kind of cases where the UFO will be described as coming into the atmosphere with a tail like a meteor, and then it'll stop. Now, is that mimicry, or is that just what happens when something comes into the atmosphere and then stops? Like, sure, the stopping's anomalous, but the heat that kind of generates on the body of the thing coming through the atmosphere, that's kind of just a natural thing. It's not necessarily trying to mimic a meteor. That's more our point of view from looking at it. The mimicry thing kind of extends to the Men in Black as well, where as soon as people kind of started saying that the Men in Black were Air Force, they started wearing Air Force uniforms and stuff like that. And it's intriguing, but there were still things wrong. Those Air Force officers weren't perfect. They couldn't eat jelly, for example. They didn't know how. And it just kind of gets weird. So, like I say, if you can pinpoint the plane and know where it's going to land and speak to passengers from the plane, then it's probably not a UFO mimicking. And you've got to kind of keep your wits about you. Otherwise, like I say, everything's a UFO. You're going to start looking at your cat and just going UFO.
Yeah. Interesting, really interesting speculation, the whole mimicry thing. But yeah. Do you want to bring up one of your next things, Dan?
Yes. So I'm going to bring up the Immaculate Constellation document. I know we've touched on the hearings.
I have that
but this
one.
was kind of, oh yeah. for any listeners who are tuning in, we didn't discuss our lists before we jumped on. We made them separately. And yeah, so the Immaculate Constellation, I nearly said it again. Conception. That was something that came out of the hearings. It was bandied about by journalist Michael Schellenberger, before the hearings hit, and he kind of did a report on it. Then when the hearings came around, this document had been handed into Congress that was a lot longer and a lot more robust. And for some reason, the front page was taken off of it. We were told it was 12 pages. It was actually 11. And it turns out that the front page was a letter from Corbell, who was the person who'd given it in. Credit to Tim Burchett for actually saying thank you to Corbell during the hearing for providing that, because Nancy Mace made out that the person that provided it was Schellenberger or someone other. The document's a little weird, though. And the reason I wanted to bring it up, apart from, just because of what it is and kind of what it went into, which was, the US having these 4K images of UFOs in a repository that we're not allowed to see, and so on and so forth, was because, there was so much in it that suggested it was an official document from the Department of Defense and things like that, when it clearly wasn't. And so you kind of have this idea of misinformation, and by that I mean the wrong information, but not intentional. Trickling into Congress. They were just reading the document itself that said, there was a classified version and this is the public version, but it's nothing that was released through FOIA or by the Department of Defense itself. And it also came from someone who was anonymous. And I think that kind of became a moment for people where I saw a lot of big figures in the UFO community being really hesitant to embrace it. And that surprised me. And it almost feels like a turning point where people are kind of fed up with unsourced things because they don't get the ball rolling as they should. If that document came from someone who was sat on those panels of witnesses at the hearing, who spoke about it because it was their firsthand experience and information, I think we'd be having a whole different conversation about it. As it is, it's a very cool document with some big implications, if true, but that if true is doing a lot of heavy lifting.
I've just got it open here. There was, like you say, quite rightly, there was the issue around Corbell presenting it to Congress, but that being left out, which doesn't look good when you're talking about transparency in general. It's like, well, why didn't you credit the person that brought it, or don't give credit to someone else that didn't? That could be an honest mistake, but just removing the page as well, it's little things, but they make a big difference. So you're like, look, this has to be done right and done well. The same way in previous hearings, we saw I can't remember the gentleman's name, trying to use VLC Media Player to play a video, and he couldn't hit the play button, the stop button, the pause button. And it was like, even if that's an honest technological mistake, that looks really bad, doesn't it? And you're like, come on. So yeah. The document was interesting. The Kona Blue document also came out this year, which was far less official and more perspective. It was a perspective document based around what a special access program or black budget program would look like under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. Allegedly, it never went ahead after OSAP and everything like that went away. It was presented, but some people said it probably did. Others were like, no, it definitely didn't. Others said it was utter nonsense. This one came out, and I mean, it looks pretty official. It looks good. I am looking at it as we speak, Dan. I think if you were going to bring something like this out, you know what you say, there are elements of like either misinformation, or it can look, there can be parts of it that could be questionable. Would it make sense to do that deliberately in any of these documents? I think we've said this before. For plausible deniability, all you have to do is put a couple of spelling mistakes in there, and people will be like, this can't be official. Look, that's not how you spell colour, and it discredits it. But there you go. That just puts the seed of doubt for anyone who maybe wanted to think it was genuine. I don't think there's anything revelatory in it, really, is there? A lot about shapes of UFOs and uniformity. Foreign adversaries seeing the same things. Large disk using clouds as concealment is lesser talked about, but still not, huge. I thought it was pretty interesting. I think it's something we'll hear more of in the coming months.
Hopefully.
Do you think we're going to hear who wrote it?
I've heard an interesting theory bandied about that it might be what resulted from Dave Grush's unreleased op-ed, that instead we're getting it in this form too. And, I have no proof of that whatsoever, but I was like, yeah, maybe that's a way to kind of get that information out. I don't know. I
Nap
just
was
want to know who
adamant.
wrote it.
Nap was adamant it wasn't Grush.
Oh, was he?
When I asked him, I said, like, is this something that David Grush has put together? And he was like, I can tell you it was not David Grush. But obviously, I wasn't going to go down the route of going, okay, was it Lou Elizondo? Was it Chris Mellon? Was it your... That's pointless. But he was very like, it wasn't Grush.
How did you phrase your question? Did you say, is this something Grush put together?
I can't remember what I asked him exactly. It's in the highlights pod, but I did ask him around, who wrote it. I think I asked him, like, would it matter who wrote it if we found out? Like, would it really make a difference? And he said yes, it would. I think I then asked him, was it David Grush? And he said no. It was like,
Sure.
this basically wasn't Grush to him. Can't remember my exact wording, but I don't think it was anything that would be like, haha, well, you never said this, which means he could have meant this. It was like, nah, it's not Grush.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm trying to think out. Like, if he said, no, it wasn't Grush that wrote it, when it could have been based on something Grush wrote and written by someone else.
I wouldn't want it
technically.
To be.
No, same. I want it to come from someone that we don't know.
Yeah.
That's a heavy hitter that's really high up and would kind of lend credence to this being completely authentic, as opposed to someone that we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe I'll come back to at the end when we talk about hopes and thoughts for 2025 and onwards. So what have we covered so far? The lack of whistleblowers coming forward, Immaculate Constellation, drone sightings. Immaculate Constellation, Dan, was one of mine as well. So the only other one I've got for talking points was the hearings in November. I think are obviously noteworthy. We got two after waiting all year for one. We had the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Oversight Committee. I think that's right.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
these names get dilly-dally, but yeah, they had two hearings, sure.
One with all the Congress people, one with the Senator people.
Yes, sure.
The one with the Senators, a couple of them was, I've put it down as being a low-key affair, Dan. I think we had Senator Gillibrand, and I can't remember the other ones, but she kind of led it with the new director of Arrow, John T. Kozlowski. They'd already had a classified briefing beforehand, so this very much felt like the after dinner mints. They'd had their main courses, and this was just we'll just get these done and we'll go. There wasn't a whole lot to that. I've said I don't think John Kozlowski would had a lot of time in Arrow. I think he was appointed back in April, something like that, May, June. By the time he started his role, got his feet under the table, he was sat in front of the Senate and discussing details. So I imagine a lot of the work was finishing up what was done beforehand and getting it in a presentable manner. So it's kind of over to him this year. The main hearing, though, was what happened a few days before in Congress, where we had the congressmen and women sitting there. And I think it was the first time I felt they appeared really disjointed, and they not all had different agendas, but where you've got like that group of Burchett, Luna, Burleson, Moskowitz, and maybe there's a few of them that are they seem together on this. Yeah. But then we had all these other folks up there, didn't we, who all just seemed to come from different places with different knowledge, different levels of interest, different questions, and it really, in the UK, we have Kellogg's variety packs of cereal, don't we, Dan? Like, where you get like some Frosties, some Cocoa Pops, some Ricicles, rather than buy
you get
one.
Those in the US as well.
I've
seen them. Yeah.
What would you get in the US? Would it be like Captain Crunch and?
No, they were Kellogg's ones.
Oh, are they?
I guess they could have been imports, maybe, but I don't know. I think people will know.
Yeah, your general variety boxes, and it just seemed like it was a bit all over the place, a little bit of everything, wasn't it? It was the UFO buffet up there, and yeah, it was lacking for me. And what I hoped would happen, I wanted some different names there than what we got. I don't think Tim Gallaudet on the public-facing side of things offered anything really, other than, I say other than, but credibility and whatnot. But as a member of the UFO community like us, you've got a level of knowledge already, and a level of assumed knowledge anyway. So you're looking for certain things, aren't you, from it? I don't think he offered anything. Lou Elizondo, I think, had to eventually testify, otherwise that one would have kept going, but we never got anything new from Lou. But his book had just came out. We had Mike Gold, who disappointed, I think. He just seemed like the nice uncle who ended up being there, that it was like, oh, this is wonderful fun. But it was like, I think the questions were wrong for a lot of them, to be honest. And then we had Michael Schellenberger, who I had hoped last minute, and I don't even know if this could happen, but he would step aside and a whistleblower would sit in the seat, on the writer of the Immaculate Constellation document would sit in that seat, and that never happened. So it kind of, and this isn't disparaging to Michael Schellenberger, because what he's done as a journalist for that is wonderful, and the work I am assuming he will still do going forward is very much needed. But you could have sat a cardboard cutout silhouette in that chair with the document in front of them, and you'd have got the same result, because what could Michael Schellenberger say that was already? So it just seemed like more processional and more to do with the process than anything getting pushed forward for that hearing. But it had to happen, and I'll stick by to, if anyone thinks, oh, Andy sounds disappointed or they haven't heard what I said previously, if this hearing happened first before the Grush hearing, it would have been much more well received, I think, all round. I think the Grush hearing set such a high bar that whatever followed it had, for me, to be more, and we didn't get that with the people that were there. But they happened, and at least we're in a place where we can kind of, first world problems, we can complain about 2 hearings happening on the UFO topic in 1 year. So yeah, your thoughts on that, Dan?
Yeah, I agree. It's crazy that we're splitting hairs about having these hearings when we've wanted this for so long, and it's great that they're happening. So even though we might seem negative about certain aspects, people should remember, like, we're over the moon, they're happening. But yeah, the Senate one with Kozlowski, the interesting thing from that, obviously, since then, James Fox has come out and said that Kozlowski has told him that he can't even part his hair without getting approval from the DOD. So everything he's saying is very sanctioned, and that was reflected in the fact that Susan Goff was sat behind him like Darth Vader or something through the whole hearing, and was in shot very much so on screen, kind of giving him side eye and stuff. And gave him, a nice little handshake and pat on the back after he was done, say, good job, lapdog. And it must be really frustrating for John, because I believe, I assume good intentions that these people take this role, wanting to do a good job in terms of informing the public and getting to the bottom of what it is, but they kind of seem hamstrung by red tape and by people directing what they can and can't say. So that was enlightening for me. However, he did still say in the roundtable that the journalists kind of had after the Arrow UAP report for 2024 was released, there were a couple of sections there where he really emphasized that there are some sightings that they have on file that, even with his science and engineering background, they just baffle him, and they baffle all the people that he gives them to. So hopefully going forward, we see a lot more of that kind of genuine discussion about the anomalies, even if they turn out to be nothing. We've got to investigate them, right? And we've got to be okay if they turn out to be nothing, because this is the point. This is what we want. You're totally bang on about all those different Congress people having different levels of knowledge when in the hearing in the House. It was really frustrating and kind of felt almost whiplashy, kind of going from questions about government efficiency and overclassification to someone asking about alien hybrids. And everyone kind of picked up on that same moment as well. It was very, I don't know, like, I don't know if you should vet the questions before they're being asked or whatnot. I'm not sure if we'd want that, but at the same time, that was kind of a waste of time.
Thinking of it that way, then, was it a little bit like me sitting down to interview a guest, and I put everything out in a certain, or I try to, in a certain format, and it kind of, I like it, hopefully it flows okay and has like a beginning, middle, and an end, as opposed to Congress hosting what was the political X space, where there was just loads of hosts and they opened the mic for a few minutes and went, anyone want to ask some questions? And it was just like, "Blah." So you might get some good stuff, but it just ended up this whole it was thinking of it like a big X space, really.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The witnesses seemed frustrated by some questions. The reps kind of felt frustrated by some responses, and I just think better use could be made of that time and of those people. And I liked your point about the cardboard cutout. Harsh, but also true. Like the meat of
And that's not
Schellenberg's
a dig at
testimony
Schellenberger.
is the document.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
great.
That's not a
Thanks for
slight
bringing
on
it
him.
forward. But every question was met with, I can't tell you my sources. And as I said already, it would be a totally different conversation if his source was sat there presenting the document from firsthand experience. And I know the conversation around whistleblowers and protections and so on and so forth, but I feel like it just kind of takes one to open the floodgates here. And had that happened, we would be having a different conversation. Unfortunately, as we saw with Grush, we saw some retaliation with some health documents of his being released, trying to paint him in a bad light because he had PTSD. That was a bad plan by whoever stuck to that plan, because the public did not kind of take to it. Someone having PTSD from being in a war zone and seeing friends die is not
people saw through that
thing that people are gonna roll their eyes at someone for. So I was glad that kind of backfired, but I was saddened that there was not really much follow-up on what Grush said and some of the things they said they were going to dig into. Like Grush said that he was going to give them an uncooperative witness list, a witness list essentially about people who he was asking questions to that were refusing to cooperate with him. That would have been enlightening. I'm sure some, John Greenwald, other journalists could have done some digging there and kind of found some stuff, but it just wasn't followed up. And so it didn't feel like a sequel. It kind of felt like a side franchise kind of starting up when we all kind of wanted that sequel piece, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the analogy. Who was it I was speaking to? Was it Brian Bender that was talking just afterwards about the kind of lack of power that Congress can actually have and individuals within Congress can actually have? And Tim Burchett was really honest to me to say, when I spoke to him the day after, I'm too lowly, basically. I don't have the backing or the sponsorship or the power to get this stuff happening. I think in the past you would have always have thought, especially if you're outside the US and don't know that politics, well, it's a congressman, so they must be able to walk in and go, I demand this, and it happens. And then you kind of find out, well, I did anyway. There's a whole hierarchy even within Congress, which makes sense that you've got folks in there who will have aspirations to one day be president, and you'll have folks in there who will have aspirations to be the designated survivor, like Kiefer Sutherland. That'll be as big as they get. And it's that was interesting for me, and really frustrating that 18 months on, they still never got Grush in a skiff. They never got to ask the questions we thought they would have been asking 18 months ago. So it really lessened any hope I had for Congress being the ones to break the doors down on this. I think it's important, again, when I spoke to Brian Bender, who's a political journalist, for folks who haven't heard that yet or don't know Brian, it keeps the heat on. These hearings keep the heat turned up, but we're not cooking the stew. You're literally letting it simmer at most, and it's going to require something else. What that something else, though, Dan, would be, I think we'll leave it as listener questions, or I think I've got some of that covered as well, but we'll get to that. So yeah, anything else on that one, or do you want to pick anything else off your list? My list is done now because we've covered everything.
Okay, yeah, I've just got two more things. So the first one is, and this kind of went under the radar a little bit, a bunch of researchers mapped the brain of a fruit fly. And it was the first time scientists had ever done this. They mapped absolutely every single network in the fly's brain. And we have a really cool image of it. You can look it up online. And they figured out what each bit does and what each bit is for. We haven't done that for the human brain. So that's kind of, I wanted to highlight that as a big turning point. The article that I was digging into just before we popped on said that it mapped the shape, position, and connections of every single one of the 130,000 cells and 50 million connections inside the brain. and was the most detailed analysis of the brain of an adult animal ever produced. And one leading brain specialist described the breakthrough as a huge leap in our understanding of our own brains. Dr. Gregory Jeffries, he's of the Medical Research Council's Laboratory of Molecular Biology, it's a mouthful, in Cambridge. He told BBC News that currently we have no idea how the network of brain cells in each of our heads enables us to interact with each other and the world around us. What are the connections? What do the signals flow through the system? Or how do the signals flow through the system that can let us process the information to recognize your face, that lets you hear my voice and turn these words into electrical signals? I think that's one worth highlighting because consciousness is such a big part of the conversation around UFOs and the paranormal and supernatural and everything. And we don't understand it. You say consciousness, it can mean like 50 different things to 50 different people. And yet here we have probably, it's equivalent to the Wright brothers flying the first plane, and landing on the moon is a ways off and kind of mapping our own heads. But this is one of the first steps to actually understanding our brains and how consciousness emerges and interacts with the world and how we see things. And as we discover that and kind of figure out how that all works, we're going to come across some answers that can answer probably a lot of data in terms of like experiences and witness testimony and things like that. Because not everything, if you take the pile of UFO experiences, not everything is going to be, something from another planet or whatever we find out they are. We're going to have a whole host of different phenomena mixed in, some unexplainable, but some of them can be explained when we kind of figure out how our brains work. There's that great example that Gary Nolan gives about the star-shaped thing that a bunch of people saw in France, and each of the witnesses kind of had a different description of the object. Now, whether or not that thing is using cognitive manipulation, we have to understand how our brains work to understand how that's even possible. The two of us can see different things. So this really is the first step towards getting towards something that can explain encounters like that. And I think it's a key puzzle piece.
Do you want to get a little bit speculative and out there on that conversation then? So is there an argument that they, quote unquote, they, the scientists or the government, whatever you want to do, just they already know exactly how the human brain works, but there's a level of information you can't give to the public? And I'll even stretch it to, when Tom DeLonge and others say that you can literally create your own reality and you can manipulate reality and make things happen. And I suppose if I take that to the extreme, I'm thinking like Neo in the Matrix, where you can literally make stuff happen, change, appear, proper psychic power type material. How do you let the public know that's real or genuine or happening or could happen? Where we are as a society, I'll just give my opinion that people aren't ready for anything like that.
No, I don't think they are. And I think the truth of it is, if you would come forward and kind of say, yeah, you can, manipulate things with your mind and throw things around and so on and so forth, I don't think everyone would have that ability. I think we would see it as like either an untapped region of the brain or some skill that we can come into. I remember before when we were talking about Neuralink, and I was saying how at the moment it's kind of really clumsy. You've got these big targets on the screen and you aim for them, and there might be 3 targets. But think of how kids work with iPhones now. When they first came out, they couldn't do anything on them. Yet now you give a kid a phone and they know swipe on the screen. And it's almost like a genetic memory that's kind of set in. After so many generations of exercises where this kind of stuff is common knowledge, this being, psychic powers, that kind of ballpark, I think it's the kind of thing that people will get much better at, and they'll have more finesse and be able to grab things at a molecular level instead of just looking at a big X or a square on the screen. So I think there's potentially a danger that if it's very simple and you can learn it real easy, you'd want to hold this knowledge back because you don't want protests happening where people are just throwing the police around all the place and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, it could be a learned skill that takes a whole bunch of generations to really learn and appreciate. And something really cool that came out this year, there are a lot of people have been into, is the telepathy tapes, where it talks about nonverbal autistic people as kind of having more control over their mind and by extension stuff beyond their bodies, because they don't feel their bodies like we do, and therefore they don't imagine themselves like we do. So there's kind of no limits on their consciousness. And could it be that the more we push in that direction, the better we all get at it? I can't imagine someone like my mom, if they said, you need to sit down every day and do this 1 hour meditation and go through these steps and you'll get much better at this.
Yeah.
She wouldn't go for that. Like, you know, she'd be happy kind of living the rest of her life as she is now. But you go 10 years down the road, a much larger portion of the population is going to have that ability. And that kind of slow learn means that you can kind of, I guess, in a way, regulate it, as the government will probably do. But I can't even guess as to what that would look like. You know, how would it work? What would the mechanism be? Could it be that there's a piece of technology where you could shut that off in certain areas? You know, like when you go into some cinemas or events, they have devices that kill your mobile phone signal. Could that be something they have?
In the
I
same
just
way,
don't know.
folks will talk about, like, and actually question, like, is it that folks with these conditions, like autism and whatnot, have more control, as you put it, or less constraints potentially on their mind?
Less constraints, yeah, exactly. It's talking about what's the default mode network. Gary Nolan talks about it a lot, and that kind of controls how we see our reality, basically. You know, how our brains kind of picture things. There's a lot more out there than we use for survival. But when you shut off that default mode network, as things like psychedelics do, you seem to have an unfiltered perception of the universe. That's the idea. And we're only just scratching the surface of that in terms of research in psychedelics and what happens to the brain and stuff like that. Even down to the point of, you know, we're all comfortable with anesthesia. You know, you go to the dentist, anesthesia happens, or you get put under for an operation, anesthesia happens. We don't know how it works. We just know that it does work. And, you know, a person goes to sleep and then they come back X time after. Usually. We know which part of the brain it affects, but we don't know if consciousness, you know, I don't know if Andy resides in that certain part of the brain. We have no science for that. We're digging into that now. So it's real cutting edge stuff. And so it could just be that when you shut that part of a brain down, or it starts to flag, as in near-death experiences, which don't always happen near death. It often happens when people are just stressed and perceive themselves as being in situations where they could die, that part of the brain does something and it changes the information you have access to, or it becomes overwhelmed and has less constraints, as you put it really well.
Thank you. And do you want to go with your last point then, just before we get to listener stuff?
Yeah, so my very last point is simply a book recommendation. It's not John Keel, before you say. It's a book called Uninvited Visitors by a guy named Ivan Sanderson. He was a biologist and zoologist, and it's from 1969, so way back. And it's kind of funny because you read it, and basically he tries to take the UFO subject, break it down into all its kind of different parts, like what could they be? What could life be? Where could we find it? And, you know, tries to kind of stick to cutting edge science, but apply the data from the UFO field to it and kind of tries to see what is viable and what isn't. And ends up at this kind of concept of what does he call it? Cosmic evolution. That evolution could be something essentially that happens similarly to here on different planets, which isn't far out there. You know, scientists accept that. Yet there's that weird red line again where they're like, yeah, they can be out there and, you know, you can have intelligent life on another planet, but it visiting us is too crazy when it stands to reason. But what I loved about this book is because it's a biologist, he's talking to academics. All the phrases kind of in it are aimed at academics. So, you know, there would be less, I guess, referring to a dictionary for someone in academia than there is for me. But I thought it was a really high level conversation on the UFO subject, and it doesn't shy away from the weirder things. It tries to kind of explain them, and it looks to nature to do that. And just as an example, he kind of talks about the what if they're life forms, and he goes through like whole classes of animals with the ability to camouflage or produce their own light or seem invisible to different kind of predators, and generally finds that while we have no kind of basis to say, yeah, we have machines like the UFOs, we don't make them like that. But nature, on the other hand, has plenty of things that do exactly what UFOs do. And it was fascinating to just read the case being laid out for that. And that's free. You can get that on archive.org. You can buy it on Amazon as well if you like the hard copies, but it is free. And I'd recommend everyone just go read it, because it might open your mind to a few possibilities.
Cosmic Evolution, coming soon to Gaia, hosted by Daniel. Yeah, it's like, it sounds like a Gaia show, doesn't it? Open up the chakra of your mind with Cosmic Evolution. Dan hawking crystals to people on Gaia.
Be one with the wave conjugations of the universe.
Yeah. For only, I can't actually slag them off. I have signed up to the membership, so yeah, I am going to watch some stuff, and people have started sending me suggestions already. So I am making a list, folks, of your Andy, watch this on Gaia and tell me what you think.
I'd love for you to do, when you get around to it, just kind of, I don't know, put your webcam on as you're watching like the first few minutes of each of these shows, and just commentate it. It'd be hilarious, because you'd be like, yeah, watching this one. You'd be like, that's Tosh, I'm switching it off. And you switch.
For anyone watching, this would be, I think, me most of the time. Yeah, so I can't promise I'm going to watch all the stuff people ask me to. I may flick through some of them, but yeah, we'll see. If it involves healing crystals, that tends to be a no. But yeah, so Dan, that's some of the main talking points we've kind of picked up from this year. Let's get to some listener stuff, and we'll just kind of touch on. We don't have to discuss everything they mention. Some folks have shared highlights, lowlights, everything in between, and we can just kind of touch on them and kind of fly through. Thank you to everyone who sent stuff in so far. First off then, Richard, he said, I was very pleased to hear just recently of the Unhidden project. I think that's something Daniel will be very well aware of. My hope is it can get some traction this year. I think it's an important and overlooked aspect of the conversation. Were you involved in the Unhidden at all?
No, I wasn't. No. I forget the names of the guys that are running it, but they're doing a great job. And it's kind of, it revolves around basically looking at the humans involved in this stuff and making sure that they're looked after. If you have an experience, you should be able to get help. And they're kind of trying to get in front of the conversation now to where it's going, so that people that have a hard time with this can go to an organization like this.
Yeah, you can go to unhidden.org, and very quickly, because I think I should have found the names out of the folks again involved. So yeah, John Priestland is the chairman, and the board is made up of volunteers that include Dr. Vinod Arujuna, Dr. Rachel Pugh, and Dr. Daniel Weaver. So yeah, that's the folks over at Unhidden. Check out unhidden.org, folks, for a bit more information on that. Richard said his highlight, tangentially related, but we've just mentioned, Dan, was the telepathy tapes going global just now. My hope for this year is the story turns out to be true, and that it's not an exaggerated misrepresentation, or worse, a complete ruse. I've not finished the series yet. I will do in the next few days. And yeah, very quickly, Dan, because we'll discuss it in more detail properly down the line. Telepathy tapes you mentioned, why for you do you think this series has kind of caught the imagination and it's gone to the kind of very near the top of the global charts for podcasts?
Yeah, it's one of these series. It's really well packaged and well told. Kai Dickens did a phenomenal job in terms of being concise and finding some really good examples, some compelling examples of behavior that doesn't seem to be able to be explained through conventional means. And through that, she kind of makes the case for telepathy being a thing that humans can do. And it's not just her, preaching from a pulpit. It's people that experience this, people that can do this, all, as I said earlier, are nonverbal. Some of them are nonverbal, some of them do speak, but they're all autistic. And we've definitely heard from Gary Nolan that autism and that kind of, I use the word neurospicy because ADHD and just not neurotypical people seem to have some abilities that kind of fall outside of the remit of what we'd expect from someone. I'm going to use the word normal, but normal is, up to the eye of the beholder.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just really well packaged. 10 episodes. Not even 10 hours, some of them are shorter.
Yeah.
But I'd highly recommend people go watch it. I've spoken to Andy just a little bit. There are some things in it that I wish kind of were elaborated on, but I know season 2 is going to go into telepathy with non-autistic people. So it's going to be really intriguing to see where it goes. And Kai Dickens seems very set on trying to build a scientific case and coming up with experiments that can be held respectable by scientists, instead of them just trying to, throw the baby out with the bathwater here because she didn't do one experiment right. So it's really compelling. It's a great story, really well put together, and I recommend everyone take the time to listen and make up your own mind.
And also, Richard mentions that he very much looks forward to the Sol Foundation talks. So we're still waiting on the videos being released from the event. I know last year it took quite a few months after the initial symposium. I say last year, 2023, because they had some technical issues, some hiccups. They had to clean up some sound on some presentations. This year was more set up for the event to be filmed, to be recorded. So I would be expecting those out pretty soon, Dan. That be fair?
Yeah, I expected them by now, to be honest, but they're going to put them out for free, so I'm not going to nitpick there. I'll appreciate them when we get them. I got hiccup, sorry.
No, that's all right. I've got Gary Nolan on in a couple of weeks as well, so I'm hoping they're out before then, but if they're not, that's fine. Plenty to talk about with Gary. And speaking of which, we have Gary with 2 R's as well, so I don't think it's the same one though. Gary says his highlight for him was Lou Elizondo testifying in front of Congress. His low point, the fact the UK mainstream media has not covered the subject, and then there's a question. So very quickly, Dan, thoughts on Lou Elizondo's testifying and the low point being the UK mainstream media not covering UFOs?
Loved seeing Lou testify. It's been a long time coming.
It had to happen,
I know
one way or the other.
Yeah, it was very satisfying for Lou to be able to stand there and take the oath and relay what he's been saying to anyone that's been listening for years now. So yeah, it's great to see him up there finally. And I know he got a lot of satisfaction from being able to do that. What was the other bit?
The mainstream media
UK.
in the UK, yeah, not covering
the lack of it. It sucks. There's really no other way to put it. The UK media seem to be allergic to UFO stuff, and when they do address it, it's always on the kids' BBC pages or something like that. But I try and think of it positively. So I think, well, who are we doing this for, if not for the next generations that are coming after us? So maybe that is a good place to have it.
I was on GB News a couple of weeks ago for like a couple of minutes again. I think I've been on there like 4 times in the last year and a half, which to their credit, they seem to cover it at least as a story. And they were asking about the drone situation. And I don't know if they expected me to jump on and bang on about UFOs. But I sort of said to them, if you're thinking this is the start of some kind of Independence Day movie, I very much doubt it. And I think I was logical enough in what I said that I don't believe it was non-human and it was interesting and mysterious and everything else, but it's got people looking up what we've kind of said. And to be fair, the guy that was hosting did say, that's a pretty logical explanation, to be fair, and I appreciate that. So maybe they were looking for something else, but I was honest. But at least it is getting some coverage.
And I think that's good as well. I think that response means that he looks at, the host of that UFO podcast, which can have a look to it, no matter what we think of the subject ourselves.
Yeah.
People from outside will look and go, "Oh, UFO guy," and he's probably looking at you now and going, "Oh, he's quite a logical chap. Yeah, he still believes in all this stuff. Maybe I should look into it." And that's kind of where we're at, right, with the whole conversation. It's just like, okay, everyone, keep your logic kind of going and just try and pull more people in to have this conversation.
Yeah, but it's still very low-key coverage if and when it happens at all. So that is disappointing. Who knows if that'll change in 2025. I think it would take something pretty big. And the final question from Gary was, do you both think that Trump will make a difference? I'm guessing he means UFO-wise here, Dan, so let's keep it to UFOs. So, I mean, you're hopefully in the next couple of months going to be a permanent resident of the United States of America.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. You're a big Trump guy. No, I'm joking. I will not declare anyone's politics on here. But what do you think in terms of Trump getting back in another 4 years and what his impact will be on the UFO subject?
Well, I think with all these things, we have to look to someone's conduct in the past to see what they might do in the future. And with Trump, he said that he's not a believer in UFOs on various interviews now, but he does believe the pilots. So I'm hopeful that though he may not stand there and go, ladies and gentlemen, we're not alone, I'm hopeful that he'll at the very least provide a little bit more transparency than we're getting now, which, to be honest, won't be that much of an increase. It won't take much to be more transparent than they are now. But also being realistic, he didn't do anything in his first 4 years, really. He said he was going to release all the JFK files, and he didn't really. He held some back. I've heard people say that he was advised to do that. How true that is, no one can really say. It's one of those choose your own adventure type things. But I don't care who does it. If it happens to be Trump who does it, or Biden on his way out the door, or someone that comes in after Trump, I don't care. I just want the truth of this subject out there so that humanity can start dealing with it. So yeah, hopeful for more transparency, but not hopeful for full open kimono disclosure.
No, and I think no matter who does it, we're at that point now. Bit of noise in the background, sorry folks, motorbikes going past. I think we're at that point now that no matter, very similar, I suppose that the drone situation may be a microcosm of what we would see on a bigger scale, that any kind of disclosure from any government, especially the US government, would be seen with, there'd be so many camps of, they're telling the truth, they're not telling the truth, they're telling part of the truth, why are they telling the truth now, this isn't the full truth. I think it would be so fractured, whatever any president now comes out and says. You would get the whole, this is all a distraction from something else. And you're like, well, Christ, if they're using aliens to distract us from something else, what the hell is a something else, That's probably a bit worrying. Oh shit, we've discovered time travel. Quick, bring the aliens out. So yeah, who knows? But yeah, for me, will Trump make a difference? The only thing I would hold on to is some folks have said that there's a difference with any president having a second term to their presidency and what they can do. And if nothing else, Trump seems to be coming in to cause some waves with, it's really odd, and I might be wrong here, not to go too far into this, but he seems to be coming in with a bit of an agenda against the quote unquote deep state and the folks who you would sort of believe run the country in the background, which is a pretty interesting angle for any president to have. I don't know if anyone's ever sort of came in and done that,
There was one. He was assassinated.
Well, yeah, that's true. So what you're saying is get one of his family members in to help. Yeah. But yeah, interesting stuff. I think it's an interesting couple of weeks ahead. The drone situation interests me because the current administration has been pretty quiet on it and frustrated a lot of people with the whole way it's handled it. Will it fizzle out by then? I don't know. Is this happening because Trump's coming in? Is it a way of putting him off, or is this the deep? And again, I'm just spitballing. I've seen people say this is the deep state doing this to kind of show Trump, we can do what we want. Blah 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 blah. It gets very conspiratorial, but it's pretty interesting and fun to talk about. But yeah,
Oh yeah,
I think there'll be some kind of impact. What that is, I don't know. So yeah, good question.
Yeah,
Thanks.
the deep state stuff always, it's just one of those phrases, like when people use that good old they. It's like, well, who? Like we're just not naming people. And I think what people mean by deep state is essentially the DoD and the military industrial complex, who aren't elected. They're just in their jobs and they get to kind of keep pushing their agenda. And so
In
Trump
my
could come
head,
in.
it's the table of people, maybe 12 of them, and they're got lamps over their head, and they all sit and decide what's going to happen that week, that month, that year. And it's like, yeah, to hell with the president, whatever they want to happen. This is what we're doing. This is what's going to happen with the economy. And yeah, I always think of that as like the deep state, the kind of shadowy unknowns.
Yeah, which I mean, in the UK, we literally have a shadow government. It's not a conspiracy thing. It's just the shadow chancellor, the shadow prime minister. They're just kind of there as the backups, essentially. It'd be funny if that's what it was, but yeah, I can see the image you mean, like one of those big war rooms with everyone kind of sat around deciding what's happening.
Like the Muse video. What's the Muse song? Time is running out. Yeah.
Time is running out. That's it.
Like that. Yeah.
But in America, it's interesting how I mean, I won't get into it too much, but how you'd even go about dismantling that, because there are certain powers the president doesn't have. You know, he can just get rid of the DoD, for example. That would have to be like a fully supported congressional act, which could possibly happen since the Republicans hold the Congress and the House this time around. But we've already seen them split over different issues, and so yeah, I try not to worry about what anyone's going to do until they actually do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Algo says, hi there. I like that. Can you please discuss the idea that disclosure is managed as a slow, controlled process spanning over years? Do you think this is the case? Why or why not? Yeah, good question. Do you think that's the case, Dan? We've discussed this before, but it's always a good question for folks coming in. Is disclosure being managed over the years a slow, controlled process?
I guess I can't give a yes or no, but the scenario that kind of most resonates with me is that since, you know, the 40s or whatever, since they first found out, that the US government first found out that this was the reality, that they've tried to kind of roll aspects of it out to see how the public would respond. And that's kind of happened repeatedly. If you look throughout history, there are kind of peaks and troughs. And there are many things being said now that have been said, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, but they just didn't catch on in the same way. And I can't help but feel that maybe they roll little facets of it out every now and then, gauge the response. And if the response is good, they push a little bit more. And then if the people shut down to it, they roll it back in. And then 10 years later, they'll try the same thing. And they'll keep attempting to do that until it's kind of finally accepted that we are not alone. And we're kind of getting to a point now where science is, you know, the rumors about the James Webb finding life on other planets is going around again at the end of the last year. God, the dates are messing with me.
Yeah.
And, you know, if science can confirm it and people accept the science on it, then it's not so out there for people to accept that we are not alone. And so that conversation gets to take, you know, a little step further. So maybe it's a game like Snakes and Ladders, where, you know, two steps forward, 10 back, and it just kind of keeps repeating until we progress bit by bit.
I'll keep my answer for my end of year predictions, which I've got. Sure. I've just made a note to say that at the end. But yeah, and you've kind of touched on what it's going to be anyway, Dan, and what you've said. So Mario, this is
oh yeah.
This is a little bit of a longer one. So buckle up. Mario says, kind of a roller coaster of the last couple of months. We now have more people looking up to the sky than ever, which is always a good thing. But as a result, we also have large amounts of people misidentifying regular prosaic stuff in the sky, insisting they are drones or something more anomalous or nefarious. Online discourse has kind of defaulted to this debate this past month. And he's got some quotes here. This is a picture of the drones you've been witnessing. No, this is a picture of a United Airlines flight. Here is the flight radar data. No, actually, it's an anomalous UFO. Kind of what we said before, Dan. Mario continues, I believe there are drones, but most I've seen online are clearly instances of misidentification, a lot of them with flight radar data to corroborate. It's gotten rather exhausting as this never devolves into an actual discussion, just kind of people screaming at each other, insisting their own belief regardless of any valid contrarian take. And to be fair, that's happening on both ends of the spectrum. Well said. I haven't felt this disconnected to online UFO discourse in a while. I had to take a step back as most of my timeline and Reddit was filled with mistaken airplanes and people screaming at each other in the comments. Rarely could I find something to truly engage with and have a good discourse in the last month and a half. I'd say that was my biggest disappointment. How online discourse on the drones developed to people arguing on 2 or 3 different sides and becoming arrogantly steadfast on whatever side they stand on, and it's coming from all ends of the spectrum. At the end of the day, we simply don't know much on the UFO topic. It's important to keep an open mind, as that's the only way to move the conversation forward. However, it's just as important to stay grounded and cautious. Mario, yeah, good shout. That was Super Mario, lol. So yeah,
nice.
And do you know what? I think he's kind of said a lot of what we said before and what our issues were with the whole drone situation. So yeah, it did get a bit frustrating and exhausting. And what I would recommend to anyone who still is following the drone stuff, especially on a platform like X, I'm not too sure on the others, but I imagine it's the same on Instagram and all that kind of thing as well. The amount of videos that you would see the video and the initial couple of comments would be, wow, this is incredible. Look at this. The government's keeping this from us, blah, blah, blah. If you just look down in the thread, normally you would see someone who wasn't a UFO person and would have some kind of aviation history in their Twitter bio. And they would have a really simple, easy explanation of what they think this is or why. And you could see that, but so many folks just look at the headline, don't they, and go, yep, that's a video of UFO. Let's run that in the morning story, with no checking. But have a look through, and that's not to say you have to look at someone just because of their Twitter bio and go, yeah, they've said it's this Airbus, whatever it might be, and believe them. However, look at both sides of the story, and that just doesn't happen enough. So well said, Mario.
Yeah, I completely agree. I even saw some videos that people were posting up that when you went to the source post, it was cropped out. When I saw it on X, it was something from TikTok. It literally said that the person that uploaded it had labeled it as made with AI.
Yes,
and that had
I
been
saw that
cropped
as
out.
well.
And
Yes.
I got called a debunker for pointing that out. And I was just like, that's on the first page. Like,
Yep.
you completely ignore what the creator wrote just to go into the comments and stick with your beliefs.
I didn't
And it
even
just,
comment on that, Dan. I saw the same thing and I saw the video and I was like, it's interesting, but does it not say really quickly that this is labeled as AI on TikTok and was created with AI, but people don't want to hear it? It doesn't matter. There's just
No.
a segment of people who don't want to see that. So yeah.
My favorite response to that video when I posted it was I said, it, look as well, the silhouette is a TIE fighter from Star Wars. Like, we all recognize this. So,
Yeah.
red flag. And my favorite response to that one was someone going, it's a TIE Defender. And I was just like, I responded very lovingly because I'm also one with a nerd.
Yeah, it's just not the argument, is it? But yeah, that's the thing. Like, and again, Dan, I can't speak for you. You can come in. I would love for any video I look at to proper blow me away and be like, this is a UFO, because then I can share it and I could be like, wow, look at this, and get a conversation going and get everyone buzzing. But if it doesn't strike me as that, or I can see that one way or the other it leans towards being prosaic, then what's the point? And you just get, especially on a platform like X, you just get a whole load of folks being really defensive and arsey. And it's just like, I can't be bothered. So, yeah. But, yeah, what can you say?
Yeah, I mean, I know you said you weren't going to speak for me, but I agree. So insert Andy's quote here.
I thought you would. Yeah, I thought you would, Dan. Next up from Ross, he says, Dan's a debunking prick. I saw a great video of no, I didn't. No, that's not what I said. Ross says, more drone action, please, with more massive government failure to address and assure his eggs Trump won't help cast any light on the mystery either. Biggest question for me is, why has Rubio gone so motherless cold? Was motherless meant to be the word there? It's auto-corrected to motherless at least.
We'll go with it.
Do you know what? I think we have to remember with any of these politicians when they come forward, whether it's Rubio, Warner, I know there's some others that have been caught up in scandals, so I'll try not to name everyone. They do have day jobs and lives, and anything to do with the UFO or UAP subject doesn't consume their entire political career, because it can't. They wouldn't get re-elected or even be allowed to stay in office if that's all they done. So I think it can just be something that does come across their desk. I would imagine this last year, especially 6 months, has been for both the Democratic and Republican parties, have been really filled with turmoil with the elections and people moving different positions. The new administration filling up the cabinet. Is it the cabinet? Whatever it's called, the positions.
Yeah.
For
The administration.
the administration. Yeah. So Trump's putting all these kind of ducks in a row. So people are moving about, because if you move someone out of one job into this, then someone else has to fill that, then someone fills that beneath there, and it's like the little Russian dolls all the way down. So I think it's just been a hell of a time for a lot of stuff going on. And you would hope, as things settle down going into January, February, March, and onwards, these folks who have an involvement in the UFO or UAP topic can come back and get more involved again. And that could only be a good thing, I would imagine. Is that fair, Dan? I don't know what else to say to that.
Yeah, I think it's totally fair. If people, it's like, Elon, for example, spends so much time online. You've got
Which
to
one?
wonder.
Which Elon?
Elon / Adrian / all the other ones spent so much time online that do you wonder, how busy are you? Like, what does your day look like? It doesn't look like you have a lot to do. So for me, at least, I find people more reputable when they're not chatting about UFOs all the time, because I know that they're doing their jobs. And then when they do kind of get to talking about this issue, it has more of an impact because they're not just in it all the time, right? And with Rubio, I hear that he does a lot behind the scenes. So we might see that kind of coming out this year, that he's been instrumental in a few more things than we realize. But that's also where all the actual work gets done. It's great to hear politicians kind of talking on news shows and stuff like that, but that's not their job. That's kind of a time out of their job. So if we want the work to be done, we have to let them work quietly. And while I would love to hear every second of the day what they're doing, that this just, that takes more time to kind of communicate that.
Q. I like that the letter is just Q, so they're quite anonymous. So like Q, who is anonymous, if you see what I've done there, Dan, said the biggest story, in my opinion, is the disclosure timeline slide leak from the Sol conference. Bear in mind, this would be Sol 2023. It makes the 2027 stuff feel real. Biggest disappointment is a lack of transparency to those living in NYC and New Jersey areas when some of us already lived through 9/11, which is a really good point. It's not a good look. I really like a lot of the stuff I've watched from Danny Sheehan and the New Paradigm Institute. I do fear some of the Blue Book stuff, considering he seems in a tight circle with a lot of Jesse Michaels guests, which link to Peter Thiel and therefore Musk. The amount of video interview podcasts focusing on anything leak or pseudoscience related are taking off. Considering monetization, it's only a matter of time until many in this sphere start working the viewership angle and begin making things up. Expectations for next year are way more talk on all public levels with more sightings, but more gaslighting. I think this flap is going to result in a lot more people with cameras meant for this. So yeah, and that slide from Soldan was the one way forward UAP campaign plan lines of effort, and it had the phase 1 demonstrate existence. Phase 2 correlate signatures, that was January 2026. Phase 3 was characterize performance 2030. Phase 4 determine nature 2034, and then phase 5 engagement was indefinite. So that was on X, floating about in February, I think.
That changed as well this year.
Yes,
because that presentation happened this year, and because those dates are all out of whack now, some of those dates literally just had more question marks over them. So I'm not sure it speaks to the 2027 thing necessarily, but it sure shows that some people inside government are thinking forward on this as to how long it would take to roll out in a sensible way.
Yeah. I look at a lot of the like the big YouTube shows. I don't call them podcasts because I'm sorry, unless it's audio based, it's not a podcast. Some of the big YouTube shows with these guys who come out of nowhere with bankrolled, because I would love to fly guests in to sit in the shed, but I can't. So
I love that everyone else has like these names for the studio where they're like, come and sit in the skiff with me, and you'd be like, come chill in the shed.
Yeah, come chill in the shed. That you literally have to stand behind me. There's no other space.
You gotta move all the bodies.
Yeah, Graham Rendell is the only person who's seen inside of this, and he always attests that yes, there's literally no space. You would have to stand behind me. But there are these big podcasts that do latch on to any topic that's just controversial in the news because it gets engagement and likes. The UFO topic, as it comes in and around these cycles, seems to do that as well. So yeah, I think and they're always going to latch on to the biggest claims, and the thumbnails kind of speak to that, don't they, as well, with these as well. So yeah, what can you do? I think I just try and look at it as a positive, that there are people who will get involved and see a Jesse Michaels or a Concrete or Danny Jones podcast or whatever it might be, and therefore or even I think Louis Elizondo's just done the one with Dana Carvey and what's the dude's name? He's Adam Sandler's mate, because he only does Adam Sandler movies. That's really bad.
I know which one.
Yeah, Dan's just kind of find out the name of it. It's a big mainstream podcast.
You think of Smartless?
Yes, Smartless. Yeah.
Yes.
So people doing podcasts like that might not necessarily be a UFO podcast, but it gets folks on those podcasts who listen, who go, UFOs, maybe it's worth me taking a look into that. And that filters down to podcasts like this, blogs, documentaries. People who are just commenting online will get followers and can build their profiles. And I mean the really genuine ones that are trying to harvest a conversation and raise awareness and all that kind of stuff, which can only be a good thing from that point of view. So yeah, good does come of this kind of stuff. And yeah, which that's just my take on that, Dan. I'll let you come in.
Yeah, I'd largely agree. The only thing I'd add is the weird thing. There are a few podcasts that kind of they make me want to raise my red flag. Jesse Michaels is one of them because he's funded by someone called Peter Thiel, and that's not a secret. It's on his profile. He says, he's funded by Peter Thiel, so he's someone that folk like to call a Thiel kid. And
I don't actually. I'll be really honest, Dan. Sorry, I don't know about all this stuff, and you've mentioned it before. I don't understand this, who this guy is, and why that's a bad thing.
So Thiel is one of these guys who's people call them Silicon Valley bros, and the Silicon Valley folk, the tech people, have wanted to kind of get into things like government contracts for a long time, and Thiel is one such person. And he runs a company called Palantir. And Palantir's job is they essentially take big data and they make software that kind of gets patterns out of it. So they can, analyze data better than anyone else by throwing money and people at it, because they kind of know the systems instead of, usually the Pentagon would hire out a company to kind of do this stuff. And this software would be, from the 80s or whatever, and it'd just be crap. Whereas Thiel swings in with Palantir. And there are a few kind of dodgy connections to some companies where, because it's not a defense contractor in the same way as Lockheed is, they can go around the world and work for multiple countries and different people with different interests, and they're just interested in getting the money. They don't care about the ideology behind it. And so you end up kind of with a company that doesn't really have a mission statement, I guess, in terms of the kind of work that it likes to do. So it kind of becomes a bit morally ambiguous depending on who they're working for. There's also connections to, and sorry if I'm misspeaking, but I'm 99% sure there's connections to a company called BlackRock as well, who are essentially, US militant company that kind of works around the world and kind of goes into war zones as private contractors that don't have to abide by international laws and can act outside the bounds of the agreements of how countries had agreed they can conduct themselves. So they could do things like using chemical weapons, torture people in ways that against the law, and the UN would kind of have them arrested for, but they're privately funded. So, money speaks. So there's a big issue kind of around why someone like that would want to get into the UFO subject. And really, I mean, it's to do with the technology. If there's technology to be had, these companies want it and they want to exploit it. They want to make money off it. They want to use it. How comfortable you feel with that is going to vary person to person. For me, it's kind of a thing to keep in mind as you see these people talking about it, especially since chances are, I forget the name of the company, but a collaborative company between Thiel, Elon Musk, and a few other billionaires who, again, all have their own interests at heart. They're not looking out for you or me. They're looking out for their bank accounts. So, you end up in that morally ambiguous area again, that they're going to be vying for government contracts going forward from this year. And obviously with Trump getting into the White House, Trump was funded very much by Thiel. Elon and Thiel are friends. So you end up with this situation where, like I say, they don't have an ideology, so they'll just hitch their wagon to whoever can make them money. And so it ends up being questionable politically, morally, in terms of, whether you support these guys and what they do behind the scenes to kind of make their billions, at least. For me, I wouldn't be surprised if this, a company from Thiel or some other billionaire that's faceless, comes out and says they have a perfect solution to the drone problem over New Jersey and will stop it happening ever again. Then I would say, in a kind of conspiratorial manner, you've probably found the person that's been doing it all along.
I don't completely agree with that, Dan, and I think you're a bit unfair. But after a word from our sponsor, Palantir, I'll come back on that. No,
I
thanks
was
for
like,
throwing it in.
oh, this is going to be intriguing. What point is Andy dug up here? No.
No, I genuinely wasn't sure because a few folks have mentioned in passing online before, oh, he's a teal kid and there's a teal thing, and I was like, yeah, it's one of those I've not had the time or desire to go in and look into it. But that
I think that's the same for a lot of people, though. They hear that name and they instantly hate it. They hear the rumor, they don't go digging into it to actually look at what these companies do. So much of what they do could be helpful,
yeah,
but they don't tend to use their technology and their billions to be helpful. They just use it to bolster their bank accounts.
Yeah, that's life, right? But explain to me how, bringing it back to Jesse Michaels, for example, and his podcast, how is it detrimental to the UFO topic when he gets like Grush on for several hours to talk about UFOs? Like, what would I don't see the correlation between it being a bad thing when Grush is on there for a couple of hours talking to Jesse Michaels. What is there like a consensus that there's a reason he's doing that, or is it a case of that it's not always like that?
No, there's not really a consensus in terms of why it's a bad thing. Like I say, it's just because it's funded by Teal's money. And the question mark is, why does Teal want in on the UFO subject so bad? There's even some ideas that Teal has kind of thrown money in the Enigma Labs part as well, in terms of their app and things like that. So it's just people, I think, raising an eyebrow at someone that would do stuff that not everyone would agree with, and coming into the UFO subject to exploit it for themselves.
So it's more of a question mark. It just puts a bit of a, as you say, red flag. It's the Metal Gear Solid exclamation mark. But it doesn't mean it's that, right? Okay.
It's going to vary for all people that kind of read about it.
Yeah.
For me, it's something to be aware of. You know, eventually in this subject, this was going to happen. Billionaires were going to come flocking to it because they have the resources to exploit the technology. You know, I'm sure Avi Loeb would love for Thiel or someone like him to just fund a bunch of these observatories he wants to put all around the world because he could get it done faster. But how much control does that come with? You know, would Avi Loeb have to give all of his data to Teal and Palantir first and give them a year exclusivity to reverse engineer or look at what they could discern from their data? I don't know. That's kind of the murky waters of this.
Yeah. No, cool, fair enough. Thank you for explaining. And if I didn't know that, there will be some people listening who are like, oh, well, that clears that up for me as well. So there you go, folks. Carbon asks or says, my hope for 2025 is Grush either writes the supposed op-ed or releases a book. Seems more likely to me considering how long this is stretched out. That's something I've said, Dan, you'll know for a while. I also hope Trump really does release all the files. JFK, Epstein, Roswell, just fucking release everything, please. Maybe we'll get lucky and the James Webb will find a Dyson sphere or something. My expectation is literally nothing of substance will happen. Trump will not release anything. The first 60 days narrative is hopium. Maybe there will be some more congressional hearings about the drones. A whistleblower or two will reveal themselves, but it will all be secondary or tertiary accounts without any actual evidence. The general narrative will be that things are advancing, but like always, it's just around the corner. Catastrophic disclosure is the carrot the grifters dangle to keep people interested. So yeah, a couple of things. Thanks, Carbon, to pick apart there, Dan. First one, just going back through, Grush either writing the op-ed or releasing a book. I don't think we're going to see the op-ed. That was one of my predictions for the year. If we don't see it soon, I think it is going to be a book.
I'd agree. And I mean, I wouldn't be entirely against that. It gives him more space to kind of talk without editors going, you need to cut this, you need to cut that, you know, you need to keep this shorter. I'd like just Grush unfiltered, you know?
Like kind of like MTV Unplugged from the mid-90s.
That's exactly what I was thinking in my head. Yeah.
Grush unfiltered, just him on a stage, acoustic band, orchestra behind him. Going, oh, this is really not what we expected. But
just singing like Bob Dylan and just telling the tale of UFOs.
he's wrote like an album of UFO related songs, and it's like, oh, this is really unsurprising. Look behind the words. Says about Trump releasing the files. We kind of touched on that already. And maybe we'll get lucky. James Webb will find a Dyson sphere or something. Do you know what? I'm ruining all my predictions here, but I've got down for James Webb coming up with something this year. I still think it will be small. But
literally like microbes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Imagine we found really tiny people. No, that's sounds like a pie. But I still think there'll be a chance that we find like lights or something on another planet. You know, something like that. Pollution, something that it's like, we might have found somebody else somewhere else, but they're really far away. I wouldn't be massively shocked on that, you know. Dyson sphere, not too sure on that kind of thing. But yeah, what's your thoughts on the chances of James Webb turning up something decent?
I mean, when you extrapolate from what we know about the planet around a star and how many more exoplanets are out there, I forget the count now, but it was well over like 6,000 the last time I looked. It stands to reason that it is inevitable that we're going to find something out there. And James Webb is the tool that we would do that with. So I think it's definitely going to find something. What that something is going to be up for debate. As you say, it's likely to be something small, you know, because it takes atmospheric readings. So it's going to be something like pollution in an atmosphere, or microbes, or, you know, something given off by biological life like methane, or, you know, whatever it breathes kind of out in its kind of life cycle. I think that's very likely. And I think that's exactly why we kind of keep hearing these rumors come up, almost like a broken clock, right? It's going to be right. At some point, it's going to be right. Just don't listen to the I told you so's, because everyone's just been spewing nonsense up until that point. But I would expect it to find something soon. And then when we can kind of go, hey, we're not alone. You know, it might not be someone that we can watch a movie with or something, but, you know, it'll be a microbe. And the role of microbes in our lives is changing. Something I almost put on the highlights for this year was, have you ever heard of mitochondria?
Yes. And
So
what I've heard from that in Scrubs or something like that.
possibly, yeah. You know, it's like essentially a beastie, a bug that's in us.
Oh no, Evolution, the David Duchovny movie.
Oh sure, yeah. Great movie.
Great movie. Listen, sorry, great movie, folks. And if you're looking for something to watch over the holidays and have never heard or seen Evolution, totally alien related, incredibly underrated comedy, go and watch it.
Yeah, especially if you only know Mulder from the X-Files.
Yeah.
Everyone loves him when he's funnier in the X-Files. This is him embracing that wholeheartedly.
Take the leg.
Cracking film. But yeah, this year they found that mitochondria, they used to think it was just what they call the powerhouse of the cell, that it just powered things. Now they're realizing that it kind of has a very direct effect on forming our bodies, our lungs, our digestive tracts, you know, so on and so forth, to the point where there was a paper I read that was questioning, you know, when you decide like, oh, I fancy a coffee, and you go get it, that it's probably mitochondria needing something in the coffee that's directing your brain to kind of think that and your body to go do that. So even the idea of free will kind of comes up for debate with these things. You know, their impacts are just bigger. So just because something's small, it doesn't mean that it's not intelligent. You know, this could still be a social structure there or something like that. And it could still constitute intelligent life, or non-human intelligence, as we put it. You know, that definition is expanding every time we kind of look at it, it feels like. I just wanted to go back to something with Peter Thiel, because I just chucked it into Google while you read the question now. And you'll know this. Remember when Hulk Hogan sued Gawker Media?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was Peter Thiel that funded him to do that.
Okay. Fair
so
enough.
that was kind of seen as a bad thing because it's a billionaire exercising his bank account to control media, basically. So there's just one example. I knew you'd recognize it because of Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, Hulk, who lost his money in a lawsuit and then won it back suing Gawker and won back more money than he lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. or sorry, Terry Bollea would have won that lawsuit because Hulk Hogan is a separate character, and anyone who knows about the original court case with Bubba the Love Sponge and his wife and the sex tape will know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so yeah. Also on that, Dan, the oh, and you mentioned coffee. Remember, I am now off coffee. Spoiler,
Which
folks.
is huge.
Yeah, I am drinking Space Goods mushroom coffee. I've actually tried to get them as a sponsor just because I'm using their stuff, but yeah, I am off coffee and on rainbow dust, it's called, and I drink
Rainbow
astro
dust.
dust at night. Yeah,
It's the newest drug in the UK.
yeah, it's all the mushroom stuff in it, and it's to try and get off the coffee side of things. But yeah, but on that, there was also the mention here from, who was it, Carbon? Expectation of nothing of substance will happen. The first 60 days narrative is hopium. Now, obviously, Stephen Bassett, who is eternally optimistic about the UFO topic and wonderful to listen to, but he is like very positive about all of this. He is really certain we're going to get proper capital D disclosure by the end of February. I would love that to be right. I don't think so. Ross Coulter has mentioned that in the coming weeks, Dan, as we speak now, that all hell will break loose, and he seems really confident there's going to be something coming down the pipeline January time. What is your expectations or thoughts, or have you heard anything even about what that might be?
No, only from Ross. So I'm really curious what it is, because it sounds like it's not something he's just like, oh yeah, this might happen in January. It sounds like a report that he's given to News Nation and is like, yeah, we're gonna
It sounds
release
very
that in
confident.
January. Yeah, just so confident. So less a prediction of something might happen and more like, no, this is definitely in the works for January.
Because Bryce on Need to Know kind of called him out on it, going, with the
He
whole,
did,
oh,
yeah.
you're putting dates on this, I'm going to hold you to it, Ross. And Ross was like, listen, this is happening. It sounded pretty major. So I would love it to be something from Grush, but it would have to be substantial, Is it, like you say, another report? Is it a follow-up on Immaculate Constellation? Yeah, it sounded pretty good. Is it the exact location of the saucer or craft too big that was built over? Probably not.
It's the announcement of Ross Fest, and he's holding a festival right outside where they're keeping it. So we're all going to go there and party and
Mate,
get drunk.
I would go to Ross Fest. I'd be up for Ross Fest. Yeah. David Schwimmer's hosting it. So yeah. But no,
Sounds good, actually. Let's go.
Almost 2 hours in, starting to get a bit delirious. No, that's fine. So yeah, so thanks for that, Carbon. We'll move on. Another Mario, a different Mario, Dan. Unless Mario signed up to Patreon twice under 2 different names, but both of them Mario.
If you see him drop off now, one Mario, that's what happened.
Just trying to get more questions on. Mario, I've put in brackets, a different one. My biggest disappointment was the program. A lot of the gravity of it hinged on Hal Putov, who to me just seems like a con man with a long-term plan. Biggest highlight were the drone sightings and the weird government response that still stays unexplained. I hope in 2025 we'll finally get some technological evidence, not just more tall tales. So thank you, Mario. Right in with the deep cut there. I don't see Hal Putov as a con man personally. I see Hal Putov as a guy who, for decades, has had an involvement in all kinds of stuff, including like with Russell Targ back in the day of what was the institute, Dan? That's totally escaping me.
It's escaping me now.
Working with the remote viewing stuff. Yeah. It's so bad that I forgot. I'll come back to this. But yeah, Dan's, I think, looking it up. But he's been working on this for decades. Yeah. Unless he's Stanford Research Institute, SRI.
Yes, SRI. That's it.
Yeah, SRI.
Cool.
Yeah.
We got there together.
Yeah, we did. So yeah, I don't see Putov. I think he's a very interesting guy, and I think when we last recorded, Dan, or the time before that, we talked about our top kind of 2 or 3 people that we think might be like the guys or the people that know as much as the folks we know would know. And I think we had like Hal Putov and Stratton would be in top 3s. So yeah, I don't see him as a con man. Totally opinion though. I mean, could be playing a long game, but I don't see to what end, especially at the age he's getting to. But yeah, fair opinion. Biggest highlight was the drone sightings and the weird response. I will 100% back you up on the weird response and the weirdness of it all. That is odd. And 2025 finally get some technological evidence, not just more tall tales. I think some kind of evidence, Dan, would be nice. Another disappointment for me in 2024, where no more videos, and I mean like a go fast, gimbal video. That kind of stuff just seems to be like, "Ugh, we never got any more of it." I know I mentioned video evidence, perhaps, but I would like some stuff to sink our teeth into in terms
Yeah,
of picking it apart at
what did
least.
we get? We had the jellyfish.
Was that 2024?
I think so. It might be an end of
We
2023.
can, but it's still some of the most recent stuff, to be fair.
Yeah, it is the most recent stuff. But like what I was going to say to the jellyfish is it's a question mark. Like we're hearing a lot of back and forth between, Sarah Gam, who says it was solved as a prosaic thing, and Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, saying that they know that the guys on UAPTF didn't solve that and never saw it, and were shown it in a hotel by them. So there's a whole bunch of question marks around that. Whereas with the go fast, tic tac, gimbal, the DoD came out to say yes, those are real unknowns. We don't know what those are, and it would be nice to get a bit more of that. Just like you say, to sink our teeth into. Even if I find things like that, they stop the community bickering for a little bit. When the community's bickering, it usually means that there hasn't been any fish food put in the tank for a little while, and the fish are eating each other. So just if the DoD are listening, just throw some fish food in the tank. The community's getting restless.
Yeah. I can't remember, did Kozlowski debunk Go Fast properly, or was it they think there's an explanation, but he never went into more detail?
They said that they think it's parallax, but the paper is kind of forthcoming. There was a slide, but you can't go and see a peer-reviewed paper on their website, which is what I want. It doesn't seal the deal for me yet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would like to see some more stuff this year. We'll finish off when we do the predictions with that kind of thing. Dara says, question, do you think UFO personalities got caught off guard with the current UFO wave, and apart from George Knapp, were a little uncertain of themselves, perhaps? So by UFO wave, you mean the current UFO / drone / UAP / orbs / misidentifications / alien craft, whatever people want to fall into the camps.
Yeah, fill in the blank.
Trying not to upset anyone. Yeah. Someone will be like, oh, you've not included interdimensional entities. And I'm like, fuck off.
Somebody clip that and just, I want that as a gift.
It's like, that's my Ross Coulthart. Fuck him, isn't it? Oh, fuck off. Do you think UFO personalities get caught off guard? I don't know. Honestly, and I don't know if this will surprise some people, I genuinely didn't look at much from December online, because I saw enough that I was like, every time I jumped on to check my socials, I was like, no, same old, same old. People, I love getting emails from folks. I get so many of this, like, check this one out, check this one out. Nothing really looks spectacular. Yeah, so I don't know if folks were uncertain. I think, not to be controversial, there was a mix of quote-unquote UFO personalities who either took advantage of the excitement, or got caught up in it themselves, or maybe I'm on the side of didn't pay as much attention to it as others did. Rightly or wrongly, I'm not saying I'd done the right thing, but just for me, I've covered it the way I wanted to cover it. Dan, I don't know how you feel about that. Personalities getting caught off guard.
Yeah, I think you laid out the spectrum really nicely there. From those who weren't interested to those who were, and everything in between. I don't think there's necessarily a right response to it. I think something like this, you had your data hoarders that were collecting just every video they possibly could. Then you had people who were doing that and declared that they were mimicking, prosaic things, and they were all UFOs in disguise. And then you had people that would just repost the interesting ones and were looking for explanations. And I think, I wouldn't say anyone really missed the boat. I would say it's a moment where you truly saw that we're all just in this trying to figure this out as we go, and no one really has answers. And I think that's the scary thing for some people, is that no one really has answers with this stuff, and everyone's kind of winging it.
Yeah.
And just some of us are just in it 24/7, and some of us aren't, you know. But for me, yeah, the mystery kind of is what drives me in this. So I've been in it. I'm covered in mud from the whole endeavor.
Yeah. Not much more to add to that, to be honest. That's fair. And we'll see what happens with it. And if in the coming days or weeks it continues and something really big happens that piques my interest, I will jump on board and I will jump on a flight out to New Jersey. I'd love to go back to New York, and I will live stream from there. To hell with what my wife says. But I don't think I'll be dusting off the passport anytime soon for that just yet. But we'll see. We'll see.
I'm gutted that I wasn't out there already, you know, with my visa, because I've got like a banging pair of binoculars, the same model that John Cahill used when. Oh yeah, I was like, should I buy a telescope
Check
or
out my
what?
banging binoculars.
And I couldn't even tell you the model, but they're the same as they use on Navy ships on the deck. So I was like, yep, gonna get a pair of those then. And they were cheaper than a telescope, and you know, you don't have to like line things up as kind of delicately as you have to do with the telescope, because of how small what you're seeing in the sky is, so on and so forth. And also I've got a really good scope that Lou gave me. Actually, I say gave, I was at his place, he was like, here, use this when we're out, and I forgot to give it back to him.
Yeah.
And then like a week later I messaged him to say, hey, I can send it back, you know, and he was like, oh, consider it my gift. I was like, oh no.
Who's that? Yeah. No, fair enough. So Katie says, I've been wanting to ask someone this for quite some time. God help you, it's me you're asking. When, if ever, an independent system will be set up to receive reports of UAP sightings and experiences from the general public? I used to think no one was organising this because the project would be such a massive undertaking both to build and operate. Just imagine sifting through all those reports, but as time goes on, this makes less and less sense to me. After all, wouldn't current experiences or sightings that are happening right now be pretty darn important for studying the phenomenon? It should be a pretty integral part of UAP research and disclosure. It surprises me that I don't hear more people talking about this issue. I think part of that, if you're looking for it to be some sort of big official setup, would be the fact is that the big official organizations, i.e. the governments and private contractors, don't want this studied on a public scale, do they? Not one they know about or want the public to know about anyway. So it goes a little bit conspiratorial, but I think that's what's going on there.
Yeah, and just to be devil's advocate there as well, you know, parts of them might not want it studied, but then the other parts that maybe don't have the resources they need to roll something like that out. You know, just look at how many videos from the New Jersey drone stuff we'll put up. Multiply that exponentially by, you know, UFO videos sent in and stuff like that. The people doing this only have so much time to kind of dig through cases. And so that's probably why we're looking more toward organizations like the Galileo project that are putting out these sensors, that even if, you know, someone with, I don't know, there's one on the roof of Harvard, right? And there are a bunch more out there, but say, for example, someone local to Harvard says, oh, I saw a UFO at this time, blah, 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 blah. There's an independent sensor that can tell them what they saw and should have recorded it. So then you're not just relying on the witness testimony of one person, you're relying on the data itself. I think that's preferable to just witness testimony. You know, if you just want to look at something that is UFO sightings and lists and lists and lists of them, then the MUFON website is right there for you, and you can have a gander, and you know, you'll see all range of stuff that people report. Yeah.
And I think if you look at something similar to what like the police would use across a country, it tends to be localized reports. You know, if you're looking at something, whether it's a burglary, shit, I can't say that. Dan, say the word.
Only if you say purple burglar alarm.
Purple burglar alarm.
Nice.
I sent a video of myself saying that to a listener who asked me on an email to say it. Sat in my pajama hoodie, like purple burglar alarm. No, so like burglaries, or kind of small petty crimes or whatever it may be, people report, like small thefts. Not that these aren't important, but smaller stuff that they go to like local reporting centres. I don't know if that goes into a national database and everything else and what that would look like. So yeah, I think it would have to be like a really big setup, and the UFO topic just isn't taken seriously enough yet. When you're still getting the military setting up procedures properly to say, no, you can report this stuff. We're a ways off the public doing it, unless actually that'll probably lead nicely on to the next listener's points, because Michelle said biggest story was the drones, biggest disappointment was Arrow debunking Go Fast, and we've covered both of those, but the biggest wish for 2025 would be a mass sighting like the Phoenix Lights. I would then, combining that, be like, if we got something really big, and Christ, let's even go with these drone sightings. Something happens one night that is undeniable. Wow, loads of these things join up together, create a massive sphere in the sky, and do something. And it's over New Jersey, and it really gets people talking internationally. Then maybe then there would be like a public UFO or UAP reporting service or center. I'm guessing you would just do that through the police. That would make the most sense to me. The infrastructure's there for it. You'd report it to them. They would file it under UFO, UAP, and it would be filed through those databases, however that might work. I don't know. But yeah, that would make the most sense to me.
Yeah, we've got I know Kozlowski said that in the coming year, Arrow are looking to open their reporting to the public. So I don't know how that's going to look going forward, because I know he spoke about people just using a form to fill out and then scanning it and emailing it in. And I just think people aren't, when we're in this age of apps and stuff like that, where, everything's really interactive and it can pull the data from the photo that you select and so on and so forth, versus just writing everything manually and sending it in. That in itself is kind of a filter to lose a bunch of data, because so many people just won't bother doing that.
Yeah.
Who has a printer, who has a scanner these days? I know many people listening to this will, but I don't, and I consider myself a bit of a techie.
I mean, I do, but it's up there, not plugged in, because I can't be
There you
arsed.
go.
I have a bit of equipment.
So if you saw a UFO, would you be getting it out and plugging it in to print off the form, to fill it out, to rescan it, to send it via? Like, it's a big ask, and that bit of friction, I think, will just have them losing data, and they won't get a good reflection of what's out there.
Like I pay for my mum's phone because I'm a nice son, and she needed a new one. And as part of the new Samsung offer, you can get a free Chromebook. So I'm claiming that because she doesn't need that, and I'm paying for the phone. But just the form to fill out to get the free Chromebook is a pain in the arse, because no matter what you upload as proof of purchase, it's not what they're looking for. And I'm tempted to just not bother because of that. But it's like a free Chromebook. So then translate that to filling out a form to report a UFO sighting. How many folk just stop bothering?
Yeah.
Too many boxes, too many clicks.
You don't even get a Chromebook out of it.
And then you don't know that. They could be
Maybe
free.
they should send a little
Palantir
badge, little
BlackRock
arrow badge.
Chromebook. Yeah.
A literal
sending out free
BlackRock, like a bit of
Chromebooks.
coal.
Yeah, to everyone. So yeah, but no, thank you for that. And Dan, what are your thoughts on Michelle's mass sighting in 2025? To be fair, 2025 sounds like a cool year in terms of just the numerology to have like a mass sighting happen.
It does, yeah. Quarter of a century. No, wait, no, it's not. Yeah, it is. Sorry, I was thinking 15. No, it is quarter of a century. Yeah. People are gonna laugh at me for that, rightly so. But
do you
yeah,
think
you're right.
Just claim it's Bluebeam? Oh, Project Bluebeam, full effect. There's been a mass sighting. This is the government distracting us from X.
Oh God, yeah. Like whenever I think of Independence Day, the people on the roof of the Empire State Building with all their signs.
Yeah.
Just mixed in amongst there will be people going like, it's fake anyway. Yeah. Like even when the wall of explosions coming towards them, they'll be like, don't run away, it's fake anyway.
Shining like a laser torch on it, a laser pointer. Like, look, it's going through the flame. That's not real. Yeah, as they get roasted. So yeah, I would love to see a mass sighting event, like a really decent one. You could argue, and folk would argue, we're seeing a mass sighting event now in New Jersey. Still struggling to get good pictures or videos of it.
And that's the thing, I think. If with Phoenix Lights, it was one event with many, many, many witnesses that included video. If we had one drone sighting from like 15 different angles and it wasn't on any flight trackers and it did weird things, then again, the conversation will be different in something like that instead of just all these like tiny pockets of data.
Yeah, absolutely. Fire in the Sun says, question, what
I
will it
like the
take for
name.
Yeah. What will it take for disclosure to happen? What will be that smoking gun moment? And they followed that up with, I was thinking about this on my hike yesterday. To me, I think that what I've heard about David Grush's, I think that what I've heard about David Grush's evidence and knowledge, which includes exact locations and names of individuals on the program, surely that would be it. That would be the smoking gun. However, George Knapp recently stated that no actions have been taken on Grush's evidence. Therefore, the only way I see some form of disclosure happening is if some brave head of department, witness, or politician gets to speak directly with the president and maybe says, look, we have something here. Even then, I don't know. So, Dan, what will it take for disclosure to happen?
Yeah, I don't know that talking to the president would do it anyway. Like, who was the president? Jimmy Carter, the one that was supposedly was told something and broke down crying and never spoke of it again. There's a good chance that would happen. You know, if they can appreciate the reasons it's being kept secret, they'd never share it with anyone.
Is it Carter that just died? Jimmy Carter?
Yes, it was, right?
Yeah.
It's possibly I said him because he's just in the front of my mind.
You're right, though. I think you're right.
But I know he had a UFO sighting and he reported it, you know, and he was a supporter of the subject. But yeah, we always get to this point, like, who, if they presented evidence, would everyone believe? And it's a really difficult one to figure out, isn't it? Unless it was the head of every country and scientists that, you know, from every country kind of presenting this evidence, they would just be holes you can pick. And even then, people would pick holes in it, wouldn't they? So,
yeah,
I don't know how big D disclosure gets done, save for, you know, a sign scenario where just a bunch of ships come down and they're just over loads of different cities and going like, here we are.
Yeah, I think that's the only proper de-disclosure anymore, because anything else is going to be met with split camps, social media posts claiming it's fake, false, a distraction tactic, any of the above. So, not that it wouldn't be interesting still. I think you need like that mass contact three-body problem type moment where everyone sees something. Yeah. That was a thing that happened in March, Dan. That was March. Three-body problem was on Netflix, you know?
I thought you meant the three-body, like the scenario. I was like, wait, I missed that.
It didn't happen. Yeah, we all just forgot about it. Yeah, but that was in March. That was on Netflix.
It's in March. So the
Friends
next
with
season should be
Aliens.
out next year?
Yeah, probably 2026, I'd guess.
Hopefully.
Or late 2025. Yeah.
Hopefully it'll be a good combo with Squid Game Season 3, Three-Body Problem Season 2.
I am looking forward more to the Chinese version of Three-Body Problem. I much prefer
Same.
that. Yeah. Much, and that got signed off as well because of the other one, so fair enough. Ian says, biggest story, New Jersey drones and associated gaslighting. Biggest disappointment, I'd hope we'd hear more from Grush. And biggest hope for 2025, mainstreaming of the telepathy tapes with a proper scientific investigation. I think we've covered all of those. Dan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I dig that. I would just say go check out the Monroe Institute Gateway process if you want to get ahead of that conversation a bit and see where it leads you.
Matt says, and we are getting to the point we maybe covered some of this stuff, folks, so we'll skip through if we have. Matt says, highlights where Lou Elizondo on The Daily Show, one of the few occasions when the general public gets to hear about the subject. I think you'd mentioned that before, Dan, with those appearances. More congressional hearings, which we've covered. Lowlights, that the UAP Disclosure Act failed again. We'll discuss that in a second. And question, I'll come back to the question, Dan. So UAP Disclosure Act failing again. Largely it didn't get through the Presidential Review Board, the eminent domain stuff. None of the big hitters got through. Do you think this is a lost cause and a dead end now, getting this language in?
I think so. I think we need to look at other scenarios now, like break the legislation up. Like a few kind of things got through, so we're only left with a few kind of pieces like eminent domain and the review board, but maybe pull them away and make them their own bill that people can vote on. And see where it goes, and also, you know, get the UAP caucus up and running, and just try and attack it from different angles, because like not even Tim Burchett himself, like he was opposed to the UAPDA, and didn't want to see it go through. Like, he was presenting his own kind of one-page bit of legislation because he thought it was too complicated.
A lot of big names
So
were against it as well, weren't they? With not like Brandon
yeah,
Fugel and Jacques
yeah.
Vallée, and those guys were all like kind of speaking out
So
against it.
even though, you know, it would have been cool to see it go through, it seems like not even the stars of this subject were kind of all agreed that it was a good thing. So it definitely needs to be looked at again and maybe broken up into different bits and addressed in different ways. Because well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and expecting different results.
Yeah. To use the Avengers thing again, it was like asking the cast of the Avengers to all approve the script that's been written for the new movie, and half of them saying this is dog shit, and half of them saying they love it. That's kind of what happened, and no one could agree. So, yeah. And the question that came from Mats was, could you summarize the main tracks or directions within ufology UAP today? It feels quite fragmented.
That first question's a tall ask. I only say that, like, not mocking the question, just there are so many different fragments that it would take us like an hour to do that.
It's the spider diagram thing.
Yeah, that would be kind of
suppose-
fun to set it all out. You know, the Greerites, the UAPDA advocates.
So let's, off the cuff then, off the top of my head, Dan, and fill in the gaps here. I would say you've got things like the Stephen Greer camp, because I think he has a lot of support, and Stephen Greer's just come out and said that he has a whistleblower ready to come forward who has videos of ETs.
Again,
wonderful. Bring him on.
Yeah, great. Bring it out. Then we'll talk.
Yep, happy to see that. I think you've got, like, I still think there's, like, if you're going to say Greer, there's a Lou Elizondo camp. I think there's folks who are very set on Lou, and Lou is now a public figure more than he was previously in the mainstream. I think you've then got people who are following the scientific side of things. So your Sol Foundations, your Galileo projects, like you mentioned.
The Visible College, let's call it. No, because that's an actual organization.
But all that stuff, right? So you've got folks who follow the scientific side of things. You've then got folks who are very much like experiencer camp. Would be one where that is the side of the subject they follow, they are passionate about, they are either experiencers of themselves, or they put a lot of faith into those stories. Not that, I don't mean that derogatory, I just mean, like, you know, the way people talk about them. And I think you've then got maybe folks who are just passive, or maybe follow the subject for entertainment, or dipping their toe in it. Yeah, have I missed any kind of big, like?
I mean,
I don't think I follow in. Oh yeah,
just,
do you know what?
The
Very
people
fair.
Are just like they're in this 24/7, but they just believe nothing and they just disavow everything, and
they enjoy the UFO
unhealthy
topic to dismiss everything.
Yeah,
which is really, I find it so weird, and I don't have a big conversation about it, but it's like me hating football, but going on and spending loads of my time listening to football podcasts, watching football YouTube shows, watching football matches, and then commenting on message boards and social media platforms about how shit football is and how they're all idiots. What's the point?
Picturing you at like the Rangers Stadium with a banner that just says football shit. Just like,
I mean,
what? Go on, go do
lie.
something else.
I'm not going to lie. As we record this on the 1st of January, Dan, I'm probably going to be doing that tomorrow, but that's a small subsection of the audience will understand why. But I do love football, but I can't imagine what's something I hate. Right? So many things. Love Island, the TV show. I don't spend all my time commenting on Love Island threads and finding the folks involved in Love Island, all the people who make podcasts, or I'm guessing there are podcasts and YouTube shows about it, and just spending all day being derogatory and going, your program's utter shit, and what a waste of anyone paying any kind of broadcasting license fees, and you're all just in this to get famous. And well, yeah, but what's the point? Like, just I don't like it, but other people do. So
I feel the same. Like, go enjoy the things you enjoy. Like, stop just popping other people's balloons. Like, it's it's unhealthy. Like, it's not a great way to live. And just go enjoy what you enjoy. Like, I love the
Yeah.
Marvel stuff, you know, more so than, you know, in this last phase than you have for sure.
Yeah.
But you don't text me every day saying Marvel shit, then you know, like we talk about it when we talk about it. But
You
it's not.
liked, what was the series with what were some of the TV series you liked that have just been on in the last year
My mind's drawing a blank now just
that you
because you
liked?
asked me.
Hawkeye?
Yeah, I enjoyed Hawkeye. Go with that one.
Shit. Echo?
Yeah.
Yeah, shit. The Secret Wars, Secret Invasion?
That was terrible.
Yeah, shit. All terrible. Did you like the
But
Eternals?
that's the thing, right?
Did you like the
Like,
Eternals when it came out?
it was all right.
Dog shit. One of the worst times of my life was watching that movie.
But that's it, right? Like you're not such a fan of what they've done, so you spend less time watching them.
Yeah,
Like that's
I just
a
won't watch them
logical
again. Or
thing to do. Like not
Yep.
just go and like when the next Captain America comes out, I dare just go sit in the cinema and just the whole time just tell everyone how they have bad taste in movies.
do you know? I'm taking my 3.5-year-old boy to go and see it. He'll be almost 4, and he loves Captain America. I think he's still a bit confused why it's not Steve Rogers, but I can't explain that to a 4-year-old. So I'm going to take him, and I'll just sit whispering in his ear the whole time. You're an idiot for liking that. But yeah, it's just such a weird thing. But I think you're right.
That'd be
Debunkers.
such a funny TikTok. Just 3-year-old, just like you're an idiot.
Getting back on topic, Dan. The debunkers as a camp. You're totally right. I don't put myself in any of those. I think there has to be a camp of I just like the UFO topic. I've had my own sightings, and just in general, I like talking about UFOs. If I didn't have this, I would still like to talk about the UFO subject. I would still watch documentaries on it. I would still check out books and audiobooks. So yeah, I think I'm in that camp, whatever that is. I just enjoy the UFO topic.
Agnostic. Like
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah, I often use the term like UFO centrist. It's like I'm not. I like seeing what all the camps are up to.
Yeah.
And just if there's something good there, there's something good there. If there's not, I'll move on and look at the other stuff that's kind of out
a
there.
bit of Greer, bit of Gaia,
Yeah, exactly.
bit of Lou, bit of Melon. See what's going on. Bit of a Buffy.
Mix it up a bit.
UFO Buffy. That's yeah, bit of a UFO Buffyist, I think is the way to put it. I will fill my plate with a multitude of foods and veggies and fruits from the platter. I don't know. It's like, yeah. That's what happens. You get this long into recording. So yeah. Yeah, I think we've covered that as best we can in a short period of time without. It's a difficult question to cover.
Oh wait,
right?
you were saying buffet.
Yeah,
I thought like vampire.
I was about to say that.
This is a second.
UFO,
yeah,
UFO
now I
vampire.
get you.
Yeah. Buffett.
Sure.
Yeah, Buffett. Warren Buffett. Peter. Peter, I'm going to miss out your experience because it's really long and we're getting on a bit here, but thank you for sharing that in. I might include that on one of the listener shows. He's put highlights would be release of imminent Lou's testimony to Congress and the current worldwide so-called drone flap. Lowlights, it's always disappointing when politics steps in to confuse, obfuscate and prevent to suit someone's self-serving agenda. Pro-disclosure legislation being blocked in the US, gaslighting from US government spokespeople as the world watches these drone flaps are a case in point. Oh God, you really put the effort in here, Peter, actually. There's a lot of stuff. Thoughts. I feel 2024 has moved us further forward, towards accepting there is as much metaphysical to this phenomenon as there is nuts and bolts. Even Lou Elizondo admitted in Imminent that he had experienced orbs in his home and had been trained on remote viewing, and even used his remote viewing abilities to somehow project his presence and frighten an imprisoned enemy combatant or terrorist. Forgot about that. Once it is accepted that we are more than our physical bodies, this canon should be extrapolated to any entity, whether human or otherwise. Some entities allegedly have heightened power, per Terry Lovelace, the ability to paralyze, communicate telepathically, mind read and put to sleep. And this plus evidence from near-death experiences and the recent revelations and telepathy tapes just emphasize the point. Consciousness is not confined to the physical body, and therefore our relationship to the phenomenon may be a lot more intimate than drones and flying saucers, buzzing military bases and population centers might suggest. I'm going to jump to your questions, Peter, because you've got a couple in there. So, Dan, question 1, I'll skip because totally different. Yeah. Question 2, common trope in The Simpsons seems to predict the future. With that in mind, who would you vote for, Kang or Kodos?
Oh, that was a left field one.
Mm.
Kang?
Yeah, I'll go Kodos just to be contrary.
Sure. Yeah.
And question 3, disinformation and discrediting is a huge part of the gatekeeper's attempts to push the toothpaste back into the tube. With that in mind, could you highlight any elements where you think Stephen Greer, Anjali, or Richard Doty may be correct? I'll go first on this, and I'll just include the 3 of them together. That there is indeed a real, genuine non-human presence on Earth and has been for some time.
Ah, damn it! You took the low-hanging fruit. Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. There's truth to what they're saying in that the overall thing that there is a non-human presence on Earth, wherever it's from, seems to be correct. That it also seems to be correct that there's some technology that's being held back from this that we understand a bit more than someone's willing to let on. And also, I would go as far to say the whole idea of interdimensionals. I'm using that word. I don't know really what it means. I can't define dimension in that sense, but whatever that is, that there's space in the universe for other kind of space times to sit on top of ours and besides ours, and that as we go forward, we'll understand that that's true. So even though Stephen Greer's Bijou is, a person in a chair with a light, I truly think that it's perfectly reasonable within science that is both understood and accepted today that there is room for beings in different frequencies, I guess would be the term, just of the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah. Did I comment on that? God, it's getting late now. Did I comment on that disinformation? Yeah, no, I did. I gave the low-hanging fruit answer, didn't I? Yeah, I think I won't comment on Anjali because I think that whole situation was what it was at the time. Stephen Greer had his best intentions and got way warped over the years. That might happen to me in decades to come. I don't know. We'll see. I doubt it. And Richard Doty, really strange one, to be honest. I know he's got involvement in, alleged, I have to say, involvement in the death of someone through government psyop type situations. Says some interesting things, says some speculative stuff. I don't know, but yeah, hey ho. Dan, we've got some almost at the end. Dan, we've got 2 listener things left, and then finish with predictions.
Sure.
Tim got in touch to give me some of his thoughts on James Fox's The Programme. So first off, the first one, Kirk McConnell. I've surprisingly not come across this guy in many years of reading and obsessing over the topic. What do we think his trajectory is in all of this? Do we think he will give evidence in a more public way? If I recall in the film correctly, he has both briefed and been present for briefings as a staffer on specific committees. Interesting because in a way he outlives the elected tropes. What did you think of the Kirk McConnell stuff, Dan? We kind of covered this in the review, but you can...
Yeah, I liked it. Like, I thought he brought something refreshing to the table, essentially hearing from inside those committees about what those members thought of the first-hand witnesses that came to them.
Is that
I'm not
the kind
sure.
of guy you would have loved to have seen at the hearings?
Oh, I was literally just going to address that. Get out
Yeah.
of my mind. Telepathy right there. No. And the reason is because I'd want to see the first-hand witnesses telling everyone what they told him for him to walk away with that impression. Save that. If we couldn't have that, then yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. I'm going to cut you saying no out and just saying yeah. Yeah, sure. I'm like, cool, thanks for agreeing.
Every
no,
answer
that's
from
fair
me is
enough,
going to
though.
be like, yeah, no. Just delete as applicable.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's fair enough. Number 2, I'd be curious for your specific thoughts, Andy, and you'll see why, Dan, with the fella they tracked down in the Calvine area. I'm fairly fact-driven myself, but opinion and speculation are part and parcel. Do you find this chap credible? I think Fox works so hard, and I doubt he gets the wool pulled over his eyes this late in his career, but it can happen. You and others on the Discord, I'd like a Scots perspective on the Calvine story in general. So I think they mean the guy who basically James has on the phone, and he's very, very Scottish.
Yeah. I forget his name. Something Greaves.
Is it Richard? No, maybe. Don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. In the review, I basically said like interesting because no one's corroborating this guy's story, and so you've got to hold her up. Like, is it something he's embellishing or what? Also, the name on the back of the photograph, Kevin Russell, isn't the name of one of the two witnesses, which is really curious, right? Like, how did that name get there? Who put that there? The only Kevin Russell that the team have found was one that actually worked for the MOD. And even though they know that he was in Scotland around that time, the guy was like, I can't recall being in Scotland at that time. So it's, possibly a conspiracy thing there. But still, Kevin Russell is not one of the witnesses. So it could just be someone that said, yeah, I'll take the fall for this, put my name on the back, and I don't mind, getting a visit from the government, whatever.
Or they're just labeling their property, at the MOD.
Possibly that.
Yeah, this is mine.
Possibly that. It was written on before it was given to the MOD. And one of the theories bandied around is that, was it a kind of a false scenario, so that the UK could confront the US over testing technology that wasn't agreed upon outside of, certain areas and times and stuff like that. It all just raises more questions because we don't have the answers. And as David Clarke likes to say, it's a modern myth in the making, and myth, and in the very literal sense, it doesn't mean it's not true. It just means that it's this tale that's passed down and becomes larger than life and picks up all of these other details. I think something that could clear it up would be getting the witnesses to talk themselves, but they certainly don't seem interested in coming forward.
And I'll give you now my specific thoughts, Tim, that you asked for before Dan answered on that.
Sorry.
All right.
I always get excited with Calvine.
I think because the guy was really Scottish. I can't see somebody being really keen to elaborate and make that up, sounding like he did and knowing people like that, because it's so ridiculous and it's not really a Scottish trait to get involved and just be like, you'd be more likely to get, UFOs, aliens, don't talk shite, it would be the phrase. So yeah, I've no reason to doubt the guy's story and whatnot, and to similar what Dan said. Regarding the Calvine story, I think it's interesting, and I've always stuck with. Can you hear the fireworks going off in the background, Dan?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit. Okay,
they do sound like fireworks, so don't worry. They're not sounding like just
me farting. Yeah, methane has been discovered in Andy's shed. Get the James Webb on the case. No, so the apologies, folks. People setting off New Year's fireworks. Yeah, at 7 p.m., 7:20 on the
leftovers, I guess.
Yeah. Idiots. It'll be that guy who goes on the phone to James Fox, trying to put us off. But no, Calvine, I won't go into it too much, but it's an interesting story. I think it was probably something top secret tech. I don't know. It's a weird one. I don't think it was a hoax. I don't think it's a reflection of a guy rowing in a pond or a mountaintop or whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know. I think it was just such a long time ago. And even if the witnesses did come forward, interesting to hear from them. What could they add to make you believe it more? Because I think by now you probably have made up your mind anyway, either way. And I don't think the witnesses would really change that too much either way, because we've heard the story. So they would just be telling us what we know already, but from their perspective.
Yeah, that's true. And I guess any more details they could give us from like questions that we'd ask about specifics. It's been so long that you wouldn't even be able to kind of rely on those. So I guess Calvine, Scotland's Roswell.
Yeah. Yeah. Just without the crash, because who's going to stop off in Scotland, No, lovely scenery, lovely area. And the last one from Tim, this is not a query so much as an observation. Jason Sands came across very compelling and believable in that film. I was not privy to his early Twitter or Facebook sort of stuff that he hosted, but if Gang of Eight type folks can and have vetted his SAP access and things, he's closer to being legit in my view. It doesn't mean people in SAPs can also be twats or liars, but I was far less worried about his believability after seeing that. Is that a fair point, Dan? So if you're not too privy to let me ask you then, Dan, take away all the Twitter stuff. Jason Sands has only done James Fox's documentary. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a lot more believable in that case, and it gets rid of a lot of the noise that kind of was around Jason Sands' story. Yeah, I agree. Like, I don't know what it was. Apparently, something made Jason jump the gun and speak out before James could put his film out. But the original plan was for that to be Jason's coming out to the public. So I think if that comes first, then there's a much healthier conversation around Jason.
Yeah. Yep, very fair. So thank you for that, Tim. And finally, from David. David said, "Hi, Andy. Here is something that's always been in my, I'm guessing, mind with regard to journalists and sources. A lot of journalists say that they have heard things but can't share them as it would burn their source, which I understand. But journalists have many, many sources. Why can't Ross Coulthart just say, I heard this, insert information here. I can't say who or when I was told, but it is something I have heard. I'm not sure that how that is burning a source. Now, in some of the cases, it may be the information could only come from one place, but that wouldn't be all of them. Like Ross Coulthart has many intelligence agency sources, so any of the information he could give. David did share with me after I said fat thumbs and messed up the thingy. So there's a word missing there, David. So any of the information he could have gave, what I'm getting at is sharing information is not burning sources, and it does feel like gatekeeping at times. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, we got there in the end. Cheers, David. Right, I get this, Dan, but I get it from both points of view. Any journalist, and this goes for the ones that I hold in high regard, and it goes for the ones I hold in less regard, and everyone in between, because that's just all subjective. Just because I like journalist A more than journalist B doesn't mean people have to go, oh, well, that's not fair, or, oh, that's the one I should follow. It's just that's the way I kind of process the information. I think there's elements of, if Dan, say you're my source, right, and I'm a journalist, and you're telling me some stuff, and you're like, listen, I'll tell you this, but you cannot say who you heard it from. And you can't say all this detail, but you can touch on it. So, for example, the location of the craft or the saucers, right? And then I go on a podcast and go, I've been told this, but I can't really say. Actually, I'll just tell you. I'm not going to say who. Then I go back to you, Dan, because I want more information for more stories. I'm helping get some information out to the public. And you go, no, fuck you. I told you not to tell anyone. I said you could mention this one specific thing, but nothing else. And I go, oh, yeah, come on. I never said your name, though. You're not giving me any more information. So, yeah, I've given the public a little bit more of the story. I can't give you the source, but now I can't get any more information to follow up or other sources. So I get why it frustrates people, but I think if you're going to get involved in the UFO topic, it's something that you just kind of have to accept. You don't have to like it. Dan, continue.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. To add to it as well, like, if that person that gave you the information starts telling people that they work with not to talk to you, that's detrimental to your work overall. So you are on the side of caution and you behave. But at the same time, people are always like, tell us what you know, tell us what you know. So I appreciate that Ross is trying to give something so that people stop being so frustrated overall about just, I know things you don't. You know, he's trying to give something tangible, but also not burn his witness. And then there's the whole idea. So when I work for Apple, and this is just Apple now, so, you know, we're not even talking anywhere close to the secrecy that some kind of legacy UFO program would have. They would kind of build things into their documents to catch people out, with the idea being that if, say, I went to a journalist and said, oh, yeah, there's a new phone coming out in 2 weeks and it has this feature before an Apple kind of presentation, and that feature is only on the paper that was given to me, and it wasn't given to anyone else that kind of has this document, instantly I kind of show myself as being the person that gave that information out. And people have been kind of caught doing this in the tech world, and have been fired and taken to court and so on and so forth. So whilst people might go to Ross and give him information. Ross has to remember that happens, and he can't differentiate between who's being given these things that may or may not be true. So he kind of just has to wait for corroboration to come forward. And when the corroboration happens, there are even more sources that he'll be burning instead of just one. So the problem kind of becomes exponentially bigger than just, one dude that told you a thing.
Yeah.
You're going to get a reputation for being a journalist that'll cross them, that isn't reliable or trustworthy. And that's why I respect, as much as Michael Schellenberger in the hearing, it was frustrating he couldn't share anything. I totally respect that he stood there and just went, nope, not burning my sources. Doesn't matter what you give me, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, you don't want to clip and seen it. And you've also got the whole, what if, and again, we're using Ross because you've mentioned Ross here, David, but what if a journalist has heard a story and he's got parts of it because he can only be told so much? He's still trying to source and vet other aspects of the story. So he comes out and says, I can tell you, I know 50% of the whole. I can tell you 20% of it because I've got that fact checked. 30% of it I'm still not sure on. And like you say, Dan, some of that could be bullshit. Some of it could be misinformation. Some of it could just be to throw them off. So they could still be corroborating that in the background and checking out stuff. And does it lead on to a bigger story? Someone says right now, I'm going to tell you this, but maybe they're being asked to help them out with some stuff. And it ends up having a knock-on effect to a different story and something else that leads to something bigger. So totally get people's frustration. It's very personal. I like the speculation, and this has nothing to do with having a podcast, but I like the speculation and the rumor and the conjecture and the what ifs. I always have. I've always mentioned, Dan, the Andrew Basiago stuff. I really enjoyed watching his stuff back in the kind of mid 2010s and whatnot. And yeah, it was always just a really fun, what if, that's it. I don't need someone to prove it's real or not, because for me, come on, it's not. Let's be honest. Andrew, if you're listening, sorry. Yeah.
Andrew straight under the bus there.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew. He's still not president on the timeline, That was always going to be one of the claims. He was going to be president one day.
We're on a different timeline now.
And that was always what happened when he didn't get elected. It was always something changed in the timeline. It was like watching the scriptwriters for the MCU mess about with the sacred timeline. But yeah,
the different multiverse. It's not the sacred timeline anymore. Sorry.
Yeah, Dan, can we finish off with predictions?
Let's do it.
We've been nearly 3 hours, so we'll rattle through these here. So my first one, that I've just literally fucking fireworks. First one, if we don't get the Grush op-ed this year, we're never going to get it. But I think we're going to hear that David Grush is bringing out a book this year.
That's fair. Yeah.
How many have you got written down, predictions?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay, I've
so
got
they're not all super serious though.
No, that's fine. So I'm happy with that. Go on, read out one.
So I think we will see the Trump admin come into office and argue over how transparent they can actually be.
Regards UFOs?
Regarding everything. I don't think it's necessarily going to go the way that everybody thinks it's going to go. And that's both sides too.
Second one I've got is Arrow will bring little to the UFO table, and I'm happy to be proven wrong.
Nice.
You can comment or not. You can just move on. Nothing to say.
Okay. No, yeah, I think that's fair. We're gonna see more people than ever look into the sky because of events like the James Webb, which I guess I should remove that because we touched on that earlier, that the James Webb will find something.
No, that's fine.
But we're going through the solar peak of the sun cycle, so we're gonna see more northern lights. And with that, we're going to have more people out looking at the sky. So expect more blurry pictures and misunderstandings and crazy things seen in the sky. Yeah,
I'll just add in my one there. I think we may get something from the James Webb which ignites public interest in ET life. And that was me going back to Algo's question all those hours ago that I said I would come back to. So yeah, I think we'll get something from James Webb this year, just to add that one in there. Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Next up, Dan.
yeah, just building on one of my highlights from this year. I think that we're going to, as well as explore outer space, we're going to be exploring inner space. Not to sound like a cliche, but we're going to be looking at consciousness more deeply. And I think stuff like the telepathy tapes and our study of psychedelics and potentially the declassification of all these psychedelics being criminal in the US will lead to a lot more research and a lot more understanding about our consciousness, and that plugs right into the UFO stuff because it does.
I loved the movie Inner Space growing up with Martin Short and
Oh
Dennis
yeah, it's a
Quaid.
good movie.
Yeah, great movie. I used to watch it all the time. Kind of like an adult's Magic School Bus.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also a banging show.
Yeah, great TV show back in the day. The drone situation will just fizzle out frustratingly, and we won't find out.
I think that's fair. I don't think we're going to get answers to that. It's just going to
It'll
be
just
one of these.
slowly stop, and they'll
Yeah.
all stop asking questions about it, and the journalists and stuff.
I mean, it almost has already, right? Like I keep seeing people referencing that it stopped over Christmas, and it didn't. Like I know people live in New Jersey, and they've been sending me videos of stuff that haven't been on flight trackers, so it didn't stop. Just the news cycle has moved on. So with people's attentions.
Like when the public get really into like Britain's Got Talent or America's Got Talent or the X Factor or something, right? Or like it would be like Pop Idol in the US and stuff, and they get really on board with the show for that series, and then the winner, and they're like, oh my god, this is like the greatest singer of all time, I love this person. And then you ask them the following year who won last year's, and they can't remember.
Yeah,
it would be like that. I think obviously we'd like to be wrong, but hey ho. Dan, over to you.
I think so. To build on the two that we just said, the James Webb and the inner space thing, I think we're going to be creeping towards disclosure, not government disclosure, but from outside subjects kind of pushing the knowledge that way and just getting us all to accept it. And I think that's probably by design, because the less spoken about the history of this, the less people are held accountable for their criminal actions.
Immaculate Constellation will be a story that continues this year.
Oh, nice. That kind of links to my next one. My next one was that we would get some imagery this year of some of these anomalous things that Arrow talks about. Arrow won't contribute to the conversation in the sense that they'll emphasize and push in the media that these are crazy things. But I do think that some stuff that Immaculate Constellation is said to house will be stuff that we see.
Did you see the random podcast who allegedly were sent or got? Someone sent me the link and I couldn't watch the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I know what you're referring to.
Pages of the unredacted pictures.
Yes.
Yeah, think that's legit.
There were a lot of AI artifacts in them, so I wasn't convinced. But you always have to leave that possibility, right?
Yeah, I will just say it looks like what I would have expected a lot of those boxes to look like, where a lot of them I'm looking at them going, yeah, it looks like a drone or some weird kind of Chinese, Russian, US craft. But there is also a mix of that looks really interesting, i.e. it's non-human. So that's what I thought.
It's one of those things that I look at and kind of go, maybe, because some of them, you could see the text and the text was garbled, just like it is when you generate AI stuff. But other ones didn't have text on at all. And so could they have thrown in a real one? And the rest of them are crap just for plausible viability? Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that's a really good example of that buffet, right? You just grab it and you have a little chew and you're like, oh yeah, that's cool. And then you move on.
Yeah. You think it's an onion ring, you pick it up and it's a squid ring. Done that once in my youth. Horrible moment in my life. And then you spit it back out and don't go back to it. A bit like some of the documentaries on Gaia I expect to be watching. Anything else?
More whistleblowers. So the UAP Disclosure Fund in their end of year email said that they'd been working with a whistleblower that was trying to come forward. For last year, they were working with them. So I've got to hope that person is going to come forward this year, and hopefully we'll see them sooner rather than later. The S is there because I really want the plural to happen and to see lots of whistleblowers, but is that going to happen? I don't know.
I'm trying to think. So that was me. I've run out of what I put down. But is there anything else we could riff off of? What about NASA involvement, Dan? Any NASA involvement you see as a swing for the fences in 2025?
I'd say only through James Webb, which is
Okay.
European Space Agency, NASA, unless something like Oumuamua happens again, and you see someone like Elon Musk just muscle all of the might towards like, yeah, let's send a camera up this time. We've seen it coming. Let's get a picture of this sucker, and then maybe that's an impact there.
Yeah. Anything else you can think?
Speaking of Elon Musk, maybe this is the year we'll find out that Adrian is Musk is Adrian is Musk.
What?
That Adrian Dittman is Elon Musk, and vice versa.
Who's Adrian Dittman?
Wait, you referenced this earlier. Wait, am I getting the name wrong?
I might have to do this. Might be the one edit on the pod, Dan. What?
Oh no,
What did I
there's this
say?
whole thing right now. That Elon Musk has a burner account on Twitter under the name Adrian Dittman that sounds, laughs, and has all the same inflections as he does when he's on Spaces. And it's become this whole thing of, is Elon Adrian Dittman or is he not? And
I
yeah.
didn't reference that.
Oh, I thought you did. Oh,
I've
well.
never heard of that. You maybe thought I did and brought that up, and I
Yeah,
went,
maybe.
"Oh yeah,
It
Yeah.
worked. No, but yeah, it's a whole mystery. So maybe we'll get to the bottom of that in 2025.
right, okay, cool." So, Dan, I suppose on that note, let me ask you one more thing then. Will Stephen Greer bring forward new whistleblowers with videos of ETs?
I'm gonna say maybe, but probably not.
Cool. Awesome. Dan, well, thank you very, very much for joining me for this. It is a hell of a year ahead, I think. I don't think we've got long to wait before we get whatever it was Ross Coulthart was talking about. I hope it's a busier first half of the year than we got last year in terms of news. I think people are ready for something a little bit different.
Yeah, I agree. If the people doing control disclosure could just spread it out a bit instead of just packing it all into the end of the year, that would be really appreciated.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for listening, folks. It's been almost 3 hours. It's been a pleasure, and we will speak to you very, very soon. That is all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to leave the podcast a review on your chosen platform. Apple and Spotify do make a huge difference to the algorithm. If you're checking the show out on YouTube, please don't forget to like and leave a comment on here as well. Any sharing you do is very much appreciated on any social media platform. And finally, you can listen to shows ad-free and sponsor-free in their glorious full versions by subscribing for less than the price of a coffee on Apple, Spotify. Just search That UFO Podcast Premium. YouTube, you can sign up and be a member, or you can do that through patreon.com. Thank you very much for listening, folks.
It wasn't a tic-tac and not quite a saucer, more like a hubcap designed by Chaucer, a little baroque and quite steampunk, like Alice was playing bass for the Parliament of Folk. The little fucker hovered right outside of my window, and when I shoved out the screen, he made it an issue.